I definitely didn't want my wife on birth control.
So when did you start tapping into natural healing stuff?
So he kind of taught me to that lawyer background, like always be safe, always be, careful.
Talk about a great mission to just help people heal and help people realize that the body can heal itself. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Real Deal Talk. That'll never get old, by the way. Today's a big day, really big day, folks. Stay tuned in this one because I've realized recently that people are hungry for information about health and wellness and holistic type healing, because we did a podcast with Eric Lawrence about a month ago, and it absolutely blew up. It got shared all over the country, all over the world. And so I reached out to my man here. We had met maybe one time before, but we have never gotten to know each other. So you're going to watch us get to know each other on the air as I do it, as you guys know how we do it here at Real Deal. Dr. Brian Trainor is in the house, folks. He is a naturopath. He has his own practice right now. Where is it in practice?
Coronado.
Coronado, okay. And you've been practicing for a total of 5 years.
Correct.
You've had your clinic now for the last year. Mm-hmm. And you've been taking peptides for the last 10 years.
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm bringing that up, folks, is because peptides are now becoming popular and kind of mainstream, quote unquote, because It's a really natural way to trigger the body's properties of being able to enhance your own natural, let's say your hormones, right? All you name it. And listen, I'm not going to get too much into it right now, but just stay tuned because we are going to fire away about everything you could imagine: holistic healing, peptides, methylene blue. Throw out some other things we're going to roll
probably hormone optimization. How to incorporate the lifestyle changes that you're already talking about into a holistic plan. I think really that zoomed out version of how does your body heal itself? How did God design you to heal? That's really what we'll hit on every aspect that we can.
I love that. I love it. I can't wait. So, but first, what I want to do here is I want to dig in, as we always do on this podcast, is we're going to dig into your backstory a little bit. How old are you now?
33, almost 34.
Young buck. And by the way, folks, the way it came to me is through the church, our church, Awaken Church. Actually, our producer, Tony Hernandez, who's here, he actually is the one who did the final introduction recently. Shout out to Tony. He does an incredible job on the podcast. He's my guy now. And he's the one who introduced us officially.
Yeah.
So welcome to the show. Appreciate you coming in, sharing your time. I know you're super, super busy. In fact, you just got back from DC?
DC, yep.
And what were you doing out there?
I was over there talking to congressmen and senators mainly about inclusion in Medicare, TRICARE, the VA, for naturopathic medicine, functional medicine. So seeing the language expand at the federal level so that at every state we can actually have more potential to take insurance, people to use their HSA, FSA. So we'll talk more about it, but that was...
I want to dig in already on that.
I'm already, there's a lack of leadership in the health field, and there's a change going in the country. They're asking young people that want to be part of the change. The old establishment, Make America Healthy Again, is doing some amazing things. So we're trying to have a seat at the table, and we've been invited. So it's the time to strike. So.
And so right now, this is a thing. This is becoming an actual movement, right?
It really is. Yeah.
I'm shocked, but that's why you're here, and that's why we're Real Deal Wellness. We launched that last year because we're determined to raise awareness that the body can naturally heal itself.
Amen. Yeah.
Right. Whereas our medical system, our quote unquote healthcare system, which I call disease management system, right? Masking symptom system, is not working.
It's not, yeah.
Right? Worldwide, I just was doing a lot of research lately. Worldwide, America, US spends way more on healthcare than any other country in the world.
Right.
Yet, Brian, you know this, we're the sickest.
Absolutely.
There's a problem. Major problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to get into that.
That's a big part of my story. That's why I'm here. I never planned to be in the medical field, never planned to do really anything in the health field, maybe possibly physical therapy. There were some goals when I was still racing triathlon to potentially get into the side of enhancing the human body. But until God got a hold of me and I went through my own illness and saw how broken the system was, I never really planned to be on this side of the table. So here we are now, and it's a blessing to get to share. And I'll share a lot of what I learned early on was from podcasts, it was
Wow.
things that weren't yet proven or part of, the mainstream.
Yeah.
And, Bulletproof Radio, some of the old Mark Hyman, Joseph Mercola, some of the original integrative functional medicine doctors, they were out there on podcast 10, 15 years ago now,
Wow.
2012, 2013. When I got diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called ulcerative colitis, there wasn't a lot of information. I was told actually by the Army doctor who diagnosed me, Brian, there's no known cause, there's no known cure, and there's really nothing you can do. Try this medication, it might suppress the symptoms a little bit. And that, fast forward 12 years, I'm fully healed. I don't have any gut issues, that no medications really, and all through mostly peptides, and I would say God's healing over the decade or so since I was diagnosed. So.
Incredible, man. I can't wait. I cannot wait to dig into this stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little backstory first. Where were you born and raised? Let's start there.
Sure, yeah. From upstate New York, so grew up about 3 hours north of the city. Parents had an amazing home. Grew up mostly Catholic. My grandma and grandpa are Irish immigrants, so they came into New York City. Led my mom upstate, and then my dad, they met actually in Germany in the Army. So always had those Army roots from my parents, but again, their parents were mostly immigrants. And Dad's dad grew up in New York City, worked his way up from the mail boy at General Motors to running some, big part of their company of GM. So kind of cool, just kind of grassroots, really Irish Catholic background, do the right thing. And they taught me amazing things growing up. I'm one of 4. I have 3 amazing sisters. They're all back home with families and kids now. And I'm the only one that ran away to the West Coast, but I would say God led me out here through the military. So got into running in high school, played a lot of sports, but got pretty good. Ran, my breakthrough race sophomore year? I ran a 4:27 miles. So kind of put me on the map as one of the younger runners. I didn't know any better. I was still playing baseball, basketball, but everyone's like, yeah, you should probably focus on that running thing. So got into it, got recruited to run in college. That led me to see, every other school I went to other than to the United States Military Academy for my recruiting visits. They showed me how great it was going to be, how much fun it was going to be. The hardest part was going to be to get in, and then it would be parties and whatever. And West Point, the week before I went for my recruiting visit, someone committed suicide, and people were trying to convince me not to go and tell me like, hey, don't come here. And it was a pretty dark time, 2012.
This was, hold on a second. Hold on.
You
went into college.
I was still, it was my senior year in high school, and I was deciding where to go to college.
Oh, okay.
And right around that time, God was pulling on my heart. I started checking out other churches, but it was on my recruiting visit to West Point. It was February. It was dark. It was miserable. It was upstate New York, about 2 hours south of where I grew up. Again, I'd been to Yale, to Dartmouth, to UAlbany, all these other schools to check out where to go, and had the opportunity through running.
For running.
Mainly through running. Yeah, I had decent grades, but
obviously,
I wouldn't have got into those schools without the cross-country track background. And at West Point, I realized it was the main school, though, that presented a challenge. It was the other ones were like, it's hard to get in, but once you're here, like I said,
gotcha. Okay.
Time. So West Point, I had people, say, don't come here. This is, and this was the miserable, like they call it the gray period from January till March, till spring break. And looking back, like I really wanted to challenge myself. That's really what I was most interested in.
So somebody at West Point had committed suicide. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think there were 3 suicides that winter, and they don't get talked about as much. I mean, now there's a better understanding of veteran suicide. In fact, I will shout out tomorrow. It's called Old Glory, Team RWB, Team Red, White, and Blue. They have a pretty good group in this area. They're running the flag, like they're running an American flag from San Diego to Arlington Cemetery over the next. They're going to do it in 16 days across the whole country with a relay team of 10 veterans. So they're leaving from the Midway tomorrow morning. I share that just because 2 of my professors founded that while I was there, in part because veteran suicide wasn't being spoken about, and in part because of there wasn't wellness opportunities like what we're bringing, what you're bringing. So it's a big passion of mine. So
wow, dude, that's incredible.
Kind of rabbit hole, but not.
Yeah. So so West Point, you chose that over these colleges just because that seemed to be more of a challenge.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, looking back, it was a way to pay for college. They basically pay you to go there. You do commit the next 10 years of your life starting junior year. So went in knowing that it was something I wanted to do. I also grew up, 9/11 happened when I was in 5th grade. So I was in New York, I wasn't right in the city, but it definitely affected friends and family near us. And enough that I was young enough to not really understand it, but I was old enough to realize like that if I could do something, I wanted to, if I could serve. So I think that God put it in my heart at a young age, and I'm grateful. I think it led me in part to where I am today. So.
And so because when you go into West Point, like you just said, that is a huge commitment.
Yeah, I didn't really know how big of a commitment at the time, but yes.
Right, because okay, we'll put you through college, But then you owe us this many years in the actual military,
Yeah,
right?
5 years active duty, and then at least 3 years reserve. So basically 8 years. So, and most do longer than that because they kind of incentivize things to go past that time. And yeah, I got let out a little bit early due to my medical stuff that we'll talk about. And that, and that's honestly why I think God's allowed me to still serve that community. Like I said, right on Coronado, I treat mostly, I think 60 to 80% of my patients are military families or veterans. And that's been not a niche because there's other ways, probably easier ways to do well in practice or in business, but that's my heart, and God's totally blessed it. So.
Wow. Okay, so go back to childhood. How were your parents? They together? Great childhood. Any moments or things that happened in childhood that was like a turning point for you, or traumatic, or anything there like you want to touch on?
Yeah. No, my parents, Jim and Eileen Trainor, shout out to both of them, especially my dad. He came to Emerge this year for the first
He did?
time. And together, I think we really had a great bonding experience.
Oh, man.
I've been going for the last few years, and having my dad, Jim, he's just a great man of God. He's a lawyer. And so he kind of taught me to that lawyer background, like always be safe, always be, careful. And I think, again, a lot of good things came from that. Looking back, my dad took major risks in his life. He married my mom, or proposed to her within 6 months of meeting her when they met in Germany. Like, he started a business when I was young in order to be home instead of work for the government and things like that. So he took major risks in his life, but I think what got passed on to us, and again, this isn't trauma. I don't think I had any major trauma, but it did lead me to kind of value safety, protection, and on my own, like control as much as I could control, so that I was insulated from maybe negatives and all that. And I think God totally broke that down in a positive way through my own health challenges.
Yeah.
Knowing that I'm not in control. I learned that pretty early on as a young adult, and I'm grateful. I think I would have went years, decades of doing my own thing, focused on my career, me, realistic. I think looking back, I was the only boy, so I got kind of, my grandparents especially spoiled me, I would say, looking back, compared to my sisters and sorry, Jen, Katie, and Colleen. But I think we've healed, and but looking back, it kind of put me on a pedestal, and I was the chosen one, the only boy, and I think I became a little bit self-centered, especially when I got into running. Running was a great opportunity. It really took me away from team sports, which, because I could control things, right? The faster I ran, the more I trained, the better I did.
Yeah, the results.
Whereas you could throw a perfect pitch down the middle, and the catcher could drop it, go back, the guy could run to first if it was strike 3 even, right? You struck him out. I just struck him out, did my job, or the ump could call a ball, right down the middle. It's like, okay. And I remember I was 16 because I was playing baseball and starting to run. And one day I actually pitched a game, got hit with a pitch, I had to run, and I ran a 2-mile race, and I could feel it the whole time. Like, you know what? I couldn't control that. Someone hit me with a ball. Like, I couldn't control the pitcher. I got to go to first, and I think I stole second, but got to the race, and it's like, I could have controlled that. I ran a 10:02 2-mile. It was sophomore year. I really wanted to break 10. I realized it was like, if I had not played that baseball game, I could have broken 10 minutes in the 2-mile, which was my goal for the season. I ended up doing it 2 races later, but I kind of learned early on, like, I need to control what I can control. And that took me some good places from age 16, I would say, when I started really focusing on running, and West Point through about age 22. And then the house, kind of came crashing down for me. A verse that really has helped me is Matthew 7. Jesus says, whoever, and this is kind of the end of the Sermon on the Mount. And I love the Lord, and hopefully that's becomes clear. And that's my main hope in life, to pass that on. It says, therefore, whoever hears my word and does them, he is the one who founded his house on the rock. But he who hears my word and does not do them is the guy who founded his house on the sand. And I always thought the sand was more like the wrong things, like founding your life on wealth, prestige, all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's actually, I did start hearing the word of God. Actually, a guy at West Point shared the gospel with me. And I know we're skipping ahead a little bit, but that really changed my life. And he showed me indirectly, not like he didn't point out, but through that, my life was starting to be founded on my own success. I won a few big races in high school and college, for triathlon in college, running in high school. And I started putting my hope and my identity in my physical ability. Yeah.
And performance.
Exactly. Performance. Yeah.
Interesting. Wow. All right. So then let's get down to when were you with the autoimmune? When did that happen?
Yeah. So I graduated from West Point 2013. So it was May 25th, 2013. 3 days later. So that was Saturday, I think Tuesday or so, I got hit by a car, fractured my femur, cycling. So I'd ridden my bike all over the country in different countries racing, and got hit 2 miles from my house on a bike
You're
trail.
kidding me.
Yep. And had this big goal of, before I went to the Army, I had about 40 days of leave, and I was going to ride my bike, actually cycling from New York down to Florida to raise awareness actually for Team RWB. We were going to do Flag Day along the way, Memorial Day, I think it was. We had all these like stops planned, and it was mostly me riding, and it was because something that was I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, when I got hit by a car, I basically had to stay at home and heal my leg. I showed up to the Army with a fractured femur. And I moved from New York out to Fort Lewis. First stop was Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Got to Missouri on crutches. Turns out I was kind of in this weird middle ground where I graduated from college, became an Army officer. And in the Army, if you're broken, if you have an injury, you're not supposed to move. You're not supposed to end up somewhere else, right? Like I was on profile, I think is the Army call it. I think what they call it in the Navy. I'm learning the Navy down here now that I've been here. But being on profile meant you're supposed to not PCS, not change duty stations. Because I wasn't really assigned to West Point, it got really confusing. But I got there and I got told, hey, I went from being top triathlete, people knew me as the top physical graduate from West Point, all this stuff from my class, to, hey, you're useless, you're broken, why are you here? So age 22, I went from, okay, this is what I'm all about, to I'm going to heal. I knew I was going to heal, and I put a lot of effort into doing different chiropractic, e-stim, changing my nutrition. So I controlled what I could control, but still the Army's like, you're broken, why are you here?
So you graduated West Point first.
Yes.
Right?
Yep. Yeah.
Then between the time that you're supposed to report to your duty station, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
That's when that happened?
Yeah. The cycling accident happened then.
Oh my gosh.
And so I showed up, and, young Lieutenant Trainor had no idea what to expect, and was thinking, well, they might have me like not run as much or something in the beginning while I rehabbed. Turns out I was pretty hard headed. Only 6 weeks or so after the fractured femur, I tried to prove to them I could go out and ruck. I did a 5-mile ruck, and, half the time I needed to, but I broke my profile. So basically I got in trouble for that. I had to go talk to this colonel and plead my case to stay in the class, where I tried to, again, I controlled what I could. I pushed through pain or whatever. They're like, no, the Army, this paper says you should not be training right now. I'm like, well, I did all these extra healing things. So anyway, during that time I started having the gut issues. So I started pooping out blood basically. And a few factors. I got every vaccine I already had because they lost my records in that move, and they changed what class I was going to be in. So I didn't know any better. I'd always just done what the doctors had set up to that point in my life. I really hadn't had any major injury, health issues. I had a few, broken bones and different things, but nothing major. Got like 12 vaccines, and that would have been August of 2013. Within a week, I was pooping out blood. I never really made that connection. And again, I'm not here to say that that's what caused it, but the immune system, the more I've learned about it, the more I wouldn't want to challenge it if we don't need to. If someone already has immunity to something, I wouldn't want to give them that same antigen again. So that was a turning point. Went from perfectly healthy, could eat whatever I wanted, probably eating 5,000 calories a day to fuel, hours of training on the bike and running, to pooping out blood. I got to the point where I was having up to 30 bloody bowel movements a day before I said anything.
Wow.
And went, a lot of people with ulcerative colitis or Crohn's, it progresses kind of slowly. Mine went from kind of 0 to 100 very quickly.
Wow.
Solid gut to in the bathroom every 30 minutes. And so that really led me on my health journey. That was pretty early on. I still stayed in the Army for the next 3 years or so. And I got to be a platoon leader as an engineer officer. Got to do a lot of just awesome things. I never got to deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan. Things were just slowing down that 2013-14 time. But God really used it. So that was the beginning of my health journey. I did move from Missouri to Washington State. That's my main duty station. So once I finished officer basic, I moved out there, and health journey continued. And I still tried to train. Actually, in that time, I was having all those gut issues. I was on the all-Army triathlon team. I was on the Fort Lewis or JBLM 10-miler, Army 10-miler team, which they race in DC every year. And it was silly. I mean, looking back, I'm like, I couldn't admit to myself that I needed to actually rest and take care of myself. Back then, I think a lot of athletes were taught to kind of focus on performance at the cost or the expense of health. And I think that has changed in the last 10, 15 years, thankfully. For younger athletes now, I have more, high schoolers and kids at least starting to realize, hey, if I build a foundation of health, I can perform better. And I didn't appreciate that at the time. So
And so along this note, what did they tell you to do? There's nothing to do. They said that nothing we can do.
Well, they gave me a few options. Government shutdown was going on in 2013, so I actually got sent off base to get diagnosed instead of by a GI doctor in the Army, gastroenterologist. With that said, I basically was told I had moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. Big words, I didn't know what they meant at the time. Basically, some amount of inflammation, and there was an actual physical attack going on in my large intestine.
Yeah.
And for me, the biggest symptom was urgency. Like I had to run to the bathroom, and it was blood and weakness or whatever. I didn't really care about, but it was when I couldn't sit through a class or had to run while I was briefing a colonel, had to run out to use the restroom, because you're former military too.
Yeah,
I mean, you can picture, briefing an op order and I gotta go. It's like, that's not, no, you do your job. I actually had a bathroom accident in the middle of a battalion level brief, and that's when I realized I actually had to get help, because I tried to hide it. I took some medications. There was one that I could take called mesalamine. I put a Band-Aid on it for a little while. Mesalamine is basically an anti-inflammatory. It's similar to ibuprofen, but for the gut. It didn't heal me, but it did allow me to get out of the really bad cycle in the beginning. And then I got put on corticosteroids, but prednisone is one of the most amazing medication. It's also one of the most harmful for long-term health.
Really?
So it put out the fire. Every time I would take prednisone, I could stop pooping out blood. Usually when I got it intravenously in the hospital, I was in the hospital about 9 times over the next 4 years until I got healed. And so I did take some medications, but I never went on the biologics in the beginning, which are Humira, Remicade, and Entyvio. I ended up on all those eventually. I kind of had to go through them all to get to the point of giving up.
And what explain those drugs? They're just something that they prescribed?
Yeah, and now if a younger man got diagnosed with UC, that most likely they would get put on a round of corticosteroids, but in that first few months they would also transition onto a biologic medication. Some are home injections. Most are infusions still in the hospital, and those are considered the standard of care now for, I think, even mild, but definitely moderate to severe autoimmune conditions. They're basically blocking a certain pathway in the body, usually, hopefully gut specific, but often broader. Like the commercials you see on TV are usually saying, and your risk of this type of cancer and this type of immune deficiency will emerge. And is what I realized. By the age of 25, I'd been on 10 different medications for this. I was osteopenic, so I'd lost bone density in my spine. I was about 20, 30 pounds heavier, lighter than I am now, which is hard to picture. I'm 150 pounds or so soaking wet right now, and in decent shape. But my running friends thought I was in great shape. They're like, "Wow, you look like you're in race shape." But I definitely was not. Could barely get out of bed at that point. So
good Lord, man, unbelievable. Yeah. And so, at what point? I think you mentioned it, but let's get deeper into it now. At what point, something else has to change, and then how did you find other ways to heal?
Yeah, so 2014, I was now established at Fort Lewis, Washington, and I also should back up. I was going to go to Florida for what was called engineer dive school. So Army has 90 divers in the Army. They're deep sea. They do mostly welding and underwater port husbandry and stuff. So different than Navy divers, different than EOD, but somewhat of the same skill set. As a triathlete, I was pretty good in the water. That was my goal. That was my ambition. I wanted to be an Army diver, get stationed either in Virginia Beach or Florida pretty much my whole career, and get to work with small teams. That was really the attraction. Out of West Point, you can't go straight into special operations or Ranger Regiment or any of that. You have to basically prove yourself for 3 to 4 years, then you can apply to do that. So I was like, well, the only main pathway to work with a team level instead of a platoon or battalion level job is to go engineer dive. So it was this really niche thing. 3 of us got selected to go from Fort Lewis to Florida. It was in that time I developed all the gut issues, was healing the broken leg. So I didn't get to go. I got sent instead of to Florida, I got sent to Washington, about as far away as I could. Never been to Washington State, never planned to go there. But JBLM was a blessing in disguise. God, even actually on the drive from Missouri to Washington, I was miserable. I was pooping out blood. And actually on the way, I stopped with a friend in Utah at BYU, of all places. That's where God started to get a hold of me. I stayed with this friend, and it was him. It was 8 dudes in a 3-bedroom place, and they all had joy. And I was like, man, what's different about these guys? My buddy Scott had just gotten back from a mission trip, and he's like, yeah, we all have faith. That's what's different. He didn't say that, but it's kind of what I picked up.
Yeah.
And they had faith, I think, in, not in Christ, unfortunately, but they had this level of faith that led them to believe that what they were doing mattered. And I was at this point where all the things I wanted to do was in question, or I was kind of failing at most of them, moving away from where I wanted to go or where I thought I should be.
Yeah.
He gave me the Book of Mormon on my way out the door the next day, and I was driving from Utah up. I think I was almost in Idaho, somewhere on the border, and I had a major bathroom accident. Just pooped out blood all in my car. Like, yeah.
Wow.
Pretty. And I remember I stopped, and I was at this rest station. There was nobody there. It was just me in the wilderness, basically. And I was like, and I cried out to God. I said, God, I need your help. I don't really know you, but because I looked at that book next to me, I'm like, oh, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian, right? And I started just asking God. I was like, well, who am I? Because if I was literally had that book next to me and was going to read the Book of Mormon, I had never read the Bible, even though I'd actually been to church growing up. I was an altar boy. I was confirmed Catholic. My dad really did help me, encourage me to explore my faith when I left the house at 18 after kind of growing up in the Catholic Church.
And this interview is brought to you by Real Deal Wellness. This is a company my wife and I just launched, Real Deal Wellness. It's a membership base. We're charging the lowest price that has ever been offered for wellness in San Diego in history. You're going to get cryotherapy, red light therapy, infrared sauna, compression therapy, and halo therapy, which is dry salt therapy. Real Deal Wellness. You can go to our website, realdealwellness.net. Also, subscribe to the channel, share it, like it. We love you. We appreciate you. Have a nice day.
I'd even gone to some other churches, went to a Third Day concert, and that actually inspired me a little bit. And but never really dug in, and no one had ever actually mentioned the idea of reading the Bible to me. I'd even met with pastors of evangelical churches and things, and they
Interesting.
kind of gave me self-help books, or I had Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life. I had Crazy Love, Francis Chan. I had all these books probably in my car at the time, but no one had connected me to the Word of Truth, to God. And in that journey, and I share all this because this is really where things started shifting for me. I got to Washington, and my first commander, basically my first immediate supervisor, I should say, was my friend Zach Abrams. He ended up sharing the gospel with me, discipling me, changed my life over the course of a few years. I was still hard-headed enough to think I could do it on my own, or not realize I needed help.
Yeah.
But in that process, and it just the way God directed that, I called out to him in that wilderness in Utah, and within a day, I got this call from Zach Abrams. I was supposed to, and I don't know if, as an Army officer, you show up and you have a sponsor. And my first sponsor really just supposed to, as an officer, you should really know what you're doing, but they point you towards the brigade battalion headquarters, say, this is where you check in. Good luck with your career. That's really all most sponsors do.
Right.
My sponsor was someone I knew from West Point at first, this guy named Jay. And he called me and he said, hey, like, I'll show you where all the cool party spots, our battalion's chill, you'll be good. Like, don't worry, like, I'll see you in a few days. I prayed that prayer. In that time, I got another call saying, hey, Jay's no longer your sponsor. I'm like, oh, that's weird.
Wow.
Like right after I prayed. And it's going to be this guy, Zach. And he was kind of straight to the point. He's like, hey, yeah, I'll see you when you get here. Look forward to meeting you. And I was like, oh, that's kind of odd. Showed up, and I also got changed from one battalion. I think it was the 864th to the 14th Battalion, Engineer Battalion. Bottom line is I ended up under Zach, and Zach, I didn't know any better that he wasn't just going to point me to the battalion headquarters. He actually offered to drive me to PT one morning. He offered to have me over for dinner, and Zach started sharing the gospel with me. He started sharing how much Jesus loved me, and he didn't do it in a overly aggressive way. But he also invited me to a men's group, a Bible study that ended up transforming my life over the next 10 years. God's continued to shape and mold me, but it was from that interaction. He took a job that was, he could just check the box saying, yep, Lieutenant Trainor, go that direction, see you later. Instead, he took ownership of that, and we ended up living together. He was my best man at my wedding 2 years ago.
Wow.
Zach, even though we're 1,500 miles apart, he continues to make an impact in my life. And I'm forever changed in part because he was sold out. And he told me 2-3 years later that, Brian, you were one of the first guys. Me and this other guy were praying for our unit, for the 14th Engineer Battalion, for the last 2-3 years. And we've helped a lot of people. We shared a lot of people. But for whatever reason, when you showed up, God had his hand on you, and we were able to run towards Jesus. We ended up together leading a men's group, leading others to Christ. There's people following Jesus today, either in the military or out of it, that in part we got to impact as a battle buddy team in the 14th. So I started seeing that early on, that hey, like, yeah, I need Christ. I need him, because there's a verse in 2 Corinthians that says, though your outer selves are wasting away, your inner selves are being renewed day by day. And my Bible study friends were the first ones that didn't really care whether I was in the hospital, whether I was winning races, whether I was no matter where it was, they loved me, the way I think we're called to love others. And before that, almost all my relationships were transactional, or my
Right.
identity was,
Yeah.
if you're a good runner, well, I want to be around you to get faster.
Of course.
You're a good swimmer, I want to spend time with you, or vice versa. People spent time with me because I was good at those things, or because they had to, because they were assigned to my unit. Instead, these people, I remember some of them I really looked up to that they could do whatever they wanted in life. Some were, pro CrossFit athletes written in the CrossFit Games. Some were 160th Night Stalker pilots, or and they chose, even in that, when they were home from deployments, to spend time with young men like me instead of investing in their career or whatever. They chose to help others follow Jesus.
And this is Zach and the crew, like his guys.
Zach and the crew, yeah. It's called the Navigators. It's a Bible study. It's kind of around most military bases now.
Really?
Navigators. So that's actually why I moved to San Diego, is to be a part of a Navigator ministry here for the Navy.
Wow.
In large part, I didn't really know that at the time. I came mostly for my own health in 2016 to get one of those biologics they wouldn't give me at Fort Lewis at Madigan. They told me, well, the Navy's doing this experimental med for UC. You could try it. That was the catalyst that got me to move to San Diego. I never planned to be here. I never planned to stay here. I moved here, and a week, and I was coming back to mental health suicide. The week I moved here in 2016, which is a little bit fast and forward, a guy jumped off a building downtown that got dropped from SEAL training. And it happened that week, and I moved here, and I was helping with this Bible study, and I started seeing, like, this is real life. Like, there's life and death. It's not a spiritual battle it's just some nebulous thing. Like, there's life and death at stake as we go out to share the truth. And I saw that pretty early on in being here, even more so than I saw at my Army base, I would say, with the gospel. And that drew me in. I feel like God has allowed me to speak into many young men's life that maybe are dealing with that, whether it's mental, physical, emotional pain. And it's kind of what I do now, more for both my spiritual side, but also and commitments on that end, but also in my business. And God's really allowed it to be one of the same.
And so going back to Zach, and when he first started sharing the gospel with you, what would you say it is about that kind of transformation or switch for you? Like, how did that help you? Like, running with Jesus, I call it. Like, how did that help you from that point? How did it change the trajectory? Like, touch on that a little bit more, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So, young Army officer, again, trying to...
I want other people to identify with this.
Yeah, I'd get healthy enough. I would come back to racing and kind of live my own life. And I was content to ride my bike 3, 4, 5 hours a day on my own, get off of work and ride till it was dark and come back, sleep, do it again. And I didn't know that there was more to life. I think I wanted that challenge. I wanted to find the things I could challenge myself in the most. Zach, what I looked at with him, I had all these other people to look up to in the unit, battalion commanders, other people. Zach was the most calm, cool, collective, and he had the most security in his identity. Like, he didn't have to stay late just to impress the boss or whatever. He got his job done. Everyone knew he was excellent at that point, I think he was an assistant S3. He'd already been a platoon leader, XO. He had been, in combat in Afghanistan. He had done route clearance. He had done all that, but none of that was who he was. And I could tell that from the beginning. He was leading Bible studies. He was sharing the gospel. It wasn't really till I moved in with him, though, that I think it all clicked. Like, I saw it from the outside. He helped me. He had a verse on his desk, 1 Timothy 4:8 says, therefore, while physical training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, for it holds value in this life and the life to come. And he was the training officer at the time, getting land and ammo and making sure we all had the training we needed to deploy and whatnot. So he was really good at his job, but he also had a great reputation. And it wasn't that Zach was this fun. What I thought was a great reputation was that everyone liked you and all this. They just knew that he was a professional. He also, when anyone I needed anywhere on base, and there was 50,000 people, I think, at Joint Base Lewis McChord, he had a contact in his phone for them. He was a connector. And I think God has gifted me in that same way of being a connector. And he inspired me to actually know those people too, not just, get to go deeper. I think at that point in my life, I'd moved, every 2 years or so with different things. And he actually showed me the depth of relationship matters. So I moved in with them, and I started seeing Zach and his friend Tom at the time. They both are now married to their wives with families, and I looked up to them immensely. But I moved in with them, and that was the first kingdom decision I feel like I made, because I was living with 2 other guys that were still friends of mine. They're young officers. They were both actually gone at Ranger School or somewhere else. So I had this nice 3-bedroom place to myself with big screen TV, all this, whatever I needed right next to the base. When Zach was like, hey, I think I can help you more than just with your job and stuff. Like, you should move in with us to get discipled, basically. That changed my life. It was the first time I actually took on a second lease. It made no sense, but God put on my heart. He's like, you should do this. And I remember that feeling of like, all right, God, this makes no sense practically, but you're calling me to do this. Once I moved in with them, I started seeing what it looked like to wake up on a mission every day. You know, they were up at 5 a.m. reading the Bible, and they didn't make me do anything, but I started following them the way they were following Christ. And that, again, a decade ago.
And what's the mission for them? You saw them on a mission. What does that mean?
For them, they were waking up every day, even though they were putting on the uniform to go to the army. They were on a mission to win souls for Christ. They were on a mission to make disciples of all nations, to live out the Great Commission. And they did it by equipping themselves in the word and in prayer first. And they went out the door, yes, in their ACUs or whatever combat uniform we were in at the time, but that wasn't who they were. You know, if I saw them at work, I would have seen them as successful first lieutenant captains.
Yep.
I would have seen them as, you know, put together men, about to get married and then getting married and seeing them grow. I would have seen all those things, but that's not what defines them, thankfully. And they were clear with the gospel, but they weren't some weird Bible thumping group. You know, they actually, they were good at what they did too. They had legitimacy. That one of my friends in that group, my friend Brad Palm, I should get him on your podcast. He shares, he's a 160th pilot. He's done everything you can think of, 17, 18 deployments. He got shot down in Afghanistan and lived in a Chinook, which is crazy.
Good Lord.
Broke every bone on the right side of his body. But he shared with the Navigator group here in San Diego that your competency is your currency. And I think that's very true in the military or among military population. Like if I'm not good at what I do, no one's going to respect me, even if I have the words of life, to say that way, the way that Peter talked about Jesus. Who cares? You know, people are going to they're not going to dismiss me if I'm not excellent at what I claim to do. So I learned that from an early age, is what I'll say, from men that I can to this day look up to and call if I need advice. And I try to now do that for others, is really what I would say my mission is.
And talking more about Zach here, because Zach's mission is, and this is, and I'm a ministry leader at Awaken as well for the Marketplace Ministry Pathfinders, and I talk about it a lot, but I'm glad you brought this. So with Zach, what I think a lot of Christians, what they need to really realize is that, you know, the commission and the assignment is just what you said, but you're not going to get anybody to him if you're not living that saved life.
Amen.
Do you know what I'm saying? Amen. That's the only reason you followed Zach, because he was living what the good book is saying. Yeah. He lives it.
Amen.
Otherwise you wouldn't have followed him.
Not at all. Yeah.
Because it would have been misaligned. Exactly. Wait, that's not lining up. Why would I follow this guy? Yeah. But what Zach has done best is he's living the word. He's living a saved life. Yeah. That'll attract people. That's a lot of Christians. They miss the boat when it comes to that. Is you got to live a saved life, and the best way you're going to get people to him is not thumping with the Bible. I'm glad you said that. Not quoting scripture. It's by living this life that is what you said, pure joy. Yeah. Beautiful relationships with your wife, your spouse, your family, your kids, connecting people, truly loving people. Amen. And having pure joy in your heart.
Amen. That's really what I saw in his life. And I didn't know it at the time, but Zach, this was, met him around March of 2014, I think. In December or so, he was actually very burnt out. He had overcommitted with ministry. He was leading the entire Navigators in the Northwest, basically, for the military. And while our other friend Mike was gone on a military course. Mike eventually got out of the military and led the ministry. Zach got burnt out, but he didn't stay there. You know, sometime between December and March, when he met me, he took a little bit of a sabbatical, stepped back from ministry, realigned. And what's really cool is he actually met his now wife, Jessica, within a week of meeting me. And I didn't know that at the time. I went to a game night, and instead of going out partying with my friends, I went to this game night, and I was like, that's silly. But I started seeing, I wanted to go. I didn't really think much about game nights. Game nights are awesome, by the way. Yeah. But I had this.
What's a game night?
Just going and playing Settlers of Catan or cards or whatever. And but really, it's intentional fellowship is what the group was known for, I think. And that game night, I had no idea, was actually set up mostly so that Zach and Jessica could interact in a healthy environment. The Chongs, my friend, the Chongs had met Jessica at church, and they were trying to matchmake with Zach, who was so focused on Jesus and the mission that he wasn't focused on women. And thankfully, I truly believe I made this joke at their wedding, that, people would have been confused early on, was Zach dating me or dating Jessica? Because he really modeled to me that, and I prayed this for the next 7 years till I met my wife, Sage, that my wife would see my capacity to love based on the way I love other people.
Mm.
And that was so evident in Zach's life that Jessica got to see that. And as a woman of God, she was attracted not to the nice things he said or the things he did for her only, right? He clearly loved her. But within a year, she saw who he was about, what he was doing on this earth. And she came to partner with him in that. And now they have 3 amazing kids. They run a ministry. Zach is a mechanical engineer, trained and worked in a field got out of the military, stayed there, even though his family's in Arizona. And now he is leading a ministry full time. Like he's leading the Navigator ministry, but he was a normal guy, a normal job for the whole time I knew him. And it was really cool to see him model that for me at a young age, that no matter what job you're in, I watched him in the military, then he got out of the military, continued to disciple me through it all. And now he's in more of a full-time ministry position because there was too much to be done, that he got out and now is fully into that.
So going back, it's now hitting me here.
Yeah.
What was the thing that got orchestrated? Was it the broken femur? Because then you got sent to this place that you wouldn't have been sent to?
Yeah.
Is that correct?
I think it's all the above.
Think about it.
I know.
Because you wouldn't have went to Zach.
Never would have went to Zach.
If you were perfect condition, no stuff going on, didn't get in the accident, you would have went that one route and that was it, right?
I think some people were praying for me. So when I look back, a part I left out was my senior year at West Point. I was winning races. I won the Collegiate Half Ironman Championship 2012. I had everything I wanted. And then I actually had a drinking incident right after that. I probably should have been kicked out of West Point, down in Austin, Texas. Ended up in the hospital. Long story.
Sure.
I not my proudest moment, but God's redeemed all of that. And I wasn't an alcoholic. But I clearly didn't know my limits, and I was immature.
Yeah. You overdrank.
Yep. And so someone shared the
Alcohol
gospel.
poisoning.
Yep. And I had a major head injury, and that I do believe actually led to a number of the other health issues. The more I've treated the brain, the more my gut's gotten better, which is a whole cool story. But took years later to see that. In that time, though, I started questioning, okay, I can go from winning a race and being on top of the world to being at my lowest so quickly. Like, this is not what I want in life. So I vowed, I didn't drink for the rest of my time till I graduated. I made all these things in my life. In that time, my friend, at the time, Captain Wilson, Austin Wilson, did share the gospel with me. He quoted Galatians 2:20, not like Paul the Bible, just said, I've been crucified with Christ. There's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. He shared that with me. And he was a guy that was a physical stud. He had the record for the obstacle course at West Point. I looked up to this guy, Austin, and he invited me to a Bible study, actually. And I started like kind of looking around it. Again, it was more of like a self-help, like I want to be better. I need to be better, kind of like guilt into faith kind of thing. Myself, no one guilted me into it. I checked it out. Again, I went to these like Bible studies, sang some songs, but the small groups at the time were like 20 plus people, and I didn't really connect. And I was a senior. I kind of had a good reputation. Most of the guys were younger than me. They were afraid to, I think, challenge me in my faith. So I kind of showed up, acted like I knew what the answers were, because I thought I did. I really thought I knew the Bible answers and stuff. Little did I know, like that planted a seed. I actually committed to go to this men's retreat, or this college retreat for the Navigators in, I guess it would have been January of 2013. So that was like October, November. God was kind of stirring in my heart. And I actually signed up, I think, to go on that retreat. In that time, I started getting healthy again, doing my own thing. I was like, oh, it's January. Nationals is in April. I can't miss a weekend of training to go to this retreat over MLK weekend. So even though I started kind of like gravitating towards Christ, turns out from across the country, this was in New York, Zach Abrams, Mike Chong, this guy Andrew Stroud, all these people that ended up discipling me, mentoring me. I lived with all 3 of their families. They actually were at that conference. God, looking back, he was trying to get a hold of me. He was trying to get a hold of me through my brokenness, my silliness. This is February of 2013. I wasn't sick yet. I didn't have any injuries. I had the head injury that kind of woke me up, but I had a whole year, I do believe. He gave me that until the following year to actually listen. But I'd heard the word. I'd been around the group. I actually had opportunities to start growing in my faith and hear and listen to the word. So I started hearing the word, and I didn't do it. I wasn't like some heathen, like doing crazy, terrible things, but I didn't follow. I actually purposely, I remember saying no to that retreat. I ended up going and training all weekend instead. And I didn't know the repercussions of that, but I truly believe like God loved me enough to send a storm in my life to get a hold of me over the next year, from 2013 to the
That's when the accident happened, all that.
Yep. All that happened, the sickness, all that happened from that time. I basically said no to a thing that and it was the first time I felt convicted. I felt like I was supposed to do something in my faith, like not in a legalistic way. I was like, I'm supposed to go to this retreat. And I purposely chose not to, to pursue my own thing. And I could rationalize it, and I, could go back and tell you why I did it. Yeah. Like looking back, like it's so cool that I found out years later that the guys that ended up discipling me, they were there, and I probably would have heard the word in a way that I never had. And so again, God gave me the nice way of like, hey, and then I basically said no. He got a hold of me through his rod and his staff, will comfort me. Like I don't, my faith, my theology, I don't know whether the sickness and all that was from God or God allowed it or whatever, but it definitely led me to where.
Because you may not, if you went the first time around, you may not have been ready to begin with.
I may not have, exactly. I may not have heard it. In the end,
it was when you were broken.
Yeah.
You were ready.
Yeah. God is way more merciful than we could ever imagine, is what I know is true. Like the things, I think when we get to see the rewind, we can see the replay of all the ways, that I'm even alive today to get to share this story and get to live for him. Like it's incredible. There's other things along the way that I probably shouldn't be here, if it wasn't for his grace, mostly through own decisions I've made, some through circumstances and stuff, but he is way better. And the life I now live, and that was the cool thing. The first guy that shared the gospel with me, it wasn't this moment that you make this decision and then you're changed only.
Right.
That is true, but there's actually a mission that we're called to live into. So he planted that seed in college. I didn't listen. God still saved me and got a hold of me. And a decade later, I'm still as awed by the journey. And like, you're right. What is the thing that caused my gut? Because that's what a lot of people want to ask. Like, what caused you to be pooping out blood and 4 years of in and out of the hospital and all this? It's like, as a good, researcher and functional medicine root cause doctor, I wish I could.
First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for watching, for listening. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you, the feedback, the love. So if you want to support the show, we have a company, Real Deal Wellness. That's our wellness center. It's a membership base where you pay $99 a month, have unlimited access to red light therapy, cryotherapy, compression therapy, halo therapy, as well as massage chairs. Also, Real Deal Sleep's our mattress company. But again, we can't thank you enough for subscribing and for sharing the show. Continue to do so. We love you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
The healing journey you've been on is worth it. Every stone that's been overturned. Because when I meet someone, sometimes they've been to 20 other doctors. Yeah. They've been to healers. They've been to all this. They've tried everything. And if there might be one more stone that they haven't overturned, and they might be so frustrated and hurting. And I have to remember that when I meet people sometimes, that it could be their worst day. They could be ready to, end it. They could be and I meet them in that case a lot of times. And that's where I was, but I was turning it more internally than externally. I wasn't like yelling at people and all this, but I remember looking back, 2013, that fall, I remember when I was first diagnosed, there was a time I was on a run, had to jump in the woods and poop out blood. And I remember thinking, like, is this life worth living? So I had that thought. I've never had that again, other than I think it was October of 2013, just feeling like, why am I here? Yeah. And thankfully God's given me this new path. And again, seems like it just happened because I'm that excited about it, but that was 12 years ago, which is amazing. Wow. And God's just so good and led me through all these journeys. And there's been some valleys in the process of usually me going off path and him directing me back, and love it more lovingly than I probably deserve. Definitely than I deserve, I should say. And it's so great to be here.
And then, so when did you start tapping into natural healing stuff?
Yeah, good question.
Quote unquote.
So 2014 had all the issues. 2015 was still in the military trying to fight through it. End of 2015, it's 2016, I would say. I was actually in so first group is the Special Forces group up at JBLM. They invited me to their performance lab to do this, exercise physiology thing where I was going to jump on the treadmill. They're going to test my VO2 max and lactate threshold, all things that I got trained to do. I was a kinesiology undergrad. I love this stuff. I got there and they put a heart rate monitor on me, and my resting heart rate was like 120. And they're like, you just drank a bunch of caffeine. At the time, I didn't drink caffeine, coffee, and I was like, nope. And they're like, well, is there anything else wrong? And I'm like, well, I've been I've been pooping out blood, but no big deal. Like I've been pushing through this. And thankfully, again, for whatever reason, God's put men in my life that are super high performers that really I look up to. There's a guy named Doc Haight. Yeah, he was awesome. Dr. Haight, he used to be the performance physician. He was like the sports medicine physician for the Army's world-class athlete program. And he had coached and I guess overseen a lot of great athletes. He looked at me and he's like, look, no, you're not jumping on that treadmill. I'm taking you to the hospital. And I'm like,
120 resting is insane.
Yeah, it was terrible. I lost so much blood that I actually needed like a blood transfusion in the hospital. That was the first hospitalization I had. I guess that was 2014 into 15. So he was the first guy that was like, hey, like, no, this isn't something you just push through. Like you need to actually get care. I tried to hide it up to that point, go to outpatient clinics, get some meds or whatever, keep going. Because I didn't want it to affect my career. Once you get on certain medications, you're not deployable by the military. I'd even gotten some corticosteroids. They're technically non-deployable, but it was the doctor trying to do me a favor. So I tried to keep it off my record for the first 2 years of dealing with it or so. He was the first one who was like, no, like you could really hurt yourself. You need to. And I learned later, like if I had kept pushing through it, I could have perforated my whole colon, had toxic megacolon. I could have died, Realistically, I could have just ended up without my colon. Over the next 2 years, twice I got consulted to remove my whole large intestine, have a colostomy bag for the rest of my life. And I think that was when I first was told, hey, you might literally be, pooping into a bag for the rest of your life. That I was like, well, there's got to be other options, right? And I'd ask, I remember my mom, even she came to visit all the way from New York to be like, what about nutrition? Does nutrition matter? They're like, well, at least my best doctors at the time would at least say, we don't know. That's a good answer, actually. It's better to say we don't know than to say it doesn't.
Right.
Nutrition doesn't matter. So what goes into my gut and what comes out the other end, like it does matter, obviously. Yeah. I knew that intuitively, but also as an athlete, and I knew whatever I put in my body did affect my performance, definitely affects my health. But I was basically told, through the conventional system, nope, take these meds. If this med doesn't work, the next option is surgery to remove my whole large intestine. Mine was so damaged, there was no way to cut out a piece or try to save it. So I actually got penciled in for surgery, and this doctor
to remove your colon.
To remove my colon. And that's really where I was reading the Bible at the time. I was starting to grow in my faith, but I was still like, well, God, like, what are we going to do about this? And I read in, I think it's 2 Corinthians 12, the day before surgery, is Paul crying out to God saying, about this thorn in his flesh. And I didn't really know what that was at the time, and I still don't know necessarily, but he said, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. I have been made strong in your weakness. And that is true. So I actually thought God was guiding me to say, you know what, God, I've cried out to you 3 times. If this is my journey, that it's to have a colostomy bag, then I'm ready, whatever you want me to do. And I was fully surrendered. I'd just given my life, I would say, fully over to him at that point. And thankfully the surgeon came in the next day and said, Brian, the way we're going to take out your colon, God never intended. The way we're going to rewire your gut and have this thing, God never intended that. So that was number one. I was like,
wait, who said that?
This is the surgeon.
He said that?
The next day. And he didn't know. I mean, I had a Bible on my, probably next to me, but I don't know if he knew I was a believer. I'd never met this guy, Colonel Johnson, I believe. Only had one more interaction with him. But yeah, lovingly, he told me that. And then he said 2 other things. He said, they say from Cleveland Clinic is where this surgery was invented. The data shows about a 1% infertility risk, but you start cutting things down there. He's like, just want to let you know, realistically, it's probably about a 10% risk that you may never have kids if you choose to have this surgery. Just the way we're going to cut things and do things, like there's a chance that we hit some wires that shouldn't be hit. So he said those 2, and then he said, look, Brian, like I can, just to be clear, I can make you better than you are right now. You're pooping out blood 30 times a day. You're miserable. You're on multiple medications. You're sick, but you'll never be whole again. You'll never be perfect again. Even on best day, you'll have 4 to 7 times. You'll have to go into this bag and empty it, and there'll be infections and this and that. He's like you'll be better than you are right now. You'll never be whole again. And I was like, okay. He walked out. I opened the Bible. End of 2 Corinthians, probably the most random chapter in the New Testament. It's just Paul greeting people, saying, when this guy passes through, help him do that. It says at the very end, 2 Corinthians 13 says, brothers, strive for perfection in all that you do. Just some random, it's like the last little charge of the book. And I think that's in New Living Translation. I'll have to post the verse, but I had this overwhelming grace and peace just like wash over me, because this guy had said, Brian, I can make you better than you are right now, but you'll never be perfect again. And then that moment, God met me through his word and said, strive for perfection. He didn't say
strive.
He didn't say you will. Didn't say, and I had just overwhelming peace that I wasn't supposed to get surgery. Sounds crazy, right? I was already reading medical journals. I was actually in some back in some pre-med classes. Like I had some really great people kind of pointing me towards medicine at that point. Logically, it's like, I should probably get surgery. You know, I've tried everything else at this point medically that they've told me about. But I just, this complete peace that you strive. You know what? The worst case is now the surgeon knows you, your colon does perforate, you're bleeding out, and you get surgery and you remove it. Best case, I didn't really have a best case at the time, but I had peace about not getting the surgery the next day because it was considered an elective surgery because I wasn't to the point where it was so damaged that it like needed to come out like imminently. So yeah, I got out of the hospital. I met this.
So you hold on. How do you hey guys, by the way, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm literally in the hospital.
How does that?
6th floor of Madigan Army Medical Center, looking out at it's a big Mount Rainier. You know, just coolest hospital. It's a great spot. Glad I haven't been back there since. But
and what did you just tap out? What did you say?
Yeah, I said, hey, and that's pretty hard to do. I was still active duty. You know, could have been told like, nope, you're assigned to get this. I said, look, yeah, no, I'm gonna look for some other options. Turns out my neighbor had been to a naturopathic doctor. She had her own journey with mold or Lyme, and she was like my mom's friend from college. This whole crazy. The next, like, from the minute of saying no.
Yeah, tell me what happened from there at that point forward.
From there, I got out of the hospital, went home.
Were they like, okay, no problem? Are you sure? Were they trying to talk you out of it?
No, honestly, the surgeon, I'm really grateful. He was about to retire from the military, so he's like, look, I'm going to be down the street. You know me now. I can get you in to get surgery if you ever need it, but you're good. And in the military, there's a lot of turnover, so it's not like there's one doctor. Thankfully, I had different doctors that were open. You know, there's some promising research. There's this, there's that. None of it really helped me. Like I tried, like I said, at least 9 different meds that were all proven to put people in remission. Even the best meds, though, and again, who knows, it's conspiracy theory wise, they all had around a 50% efficacy rate. Meaning if you go on this biologic, you get 3 infusions of it, 50% of people do go into remission, stop pooping out blood, have resolution of symptoms, and the colonoscopy looks clean afterwards. That's great, but there's 50% that don't. But most of the meds, they'll get like 1 or 2% better. And some people would say it's like they already probably have, and we do, right? In natural medicine, we have ways to actually help people. And I will say, nothing I share is medical advice. This is my own journey. You know, I have a license and all that, but I love talking about this because in the end, I have helped people get off of biologic meds. I have helped people restore to full health that were told the same thing I was told, that, hey, you're never going to be healthy again. You're going to be either sick or you're going to have missing body parts through this. That's just not true. There are other options.
And you need to stay on these meds.
Yeah, exactly. That's the biggest thing. I think that's the big, right? So health span versus lifespan. The main push, the best thing for business would be for people to be alive, but not healthy. And that's really our health span is how old are we? How long can we go while still being healthy? Most people don't want to live in that area where they're alive, but not well. And that's what we focus on. And but the conventional medical system, it's incentivized to keep people in that state of alive, but not well.
And what's so now we're going to get down here. So what's the age, like, where the percentage is so high in our country, in America, where you are not healthy? Is it like 40 plus?
I would say most of the research is 50 and above.
50 and above.
And there's a few reasons for that, most likely. Women going into menopause definitely changes things. And that can happen earlier or later, and we see that. Same with men. There's it's that period where we're still grinding and maybe haven't realized, like, because we've kind of created both culturally this idea you get to 60, 65, and then you can retire. And by that point, though, you might be so broken. So, which is
the norm. It is the norm.
Yeah. So it's usually somewhere between that 50 and 65 where people kind of get sold and want to believe there's a Band-Aid that could at least help them get to that point where then they can retire and then they can work on themselves and do all that. And that's such a lie. Unfortunately, the body starts accumulating, toxins and damage and things that can keep them. You're investing in your health now can make a major difference. And I'm preaching to the choir to you. But yeah, it seems like somewhere around 50 is where some people have a wake-up call, or they just kind of fall into almost every year they go to their doctor and get put on a new med, a cholesterol med, a blood pressure med, antidepressant. It's like one after the other. And, at a minimum, we should be checking and looking at their hormones. We should be looking at their sleep, their nutrition, their lifestyle. And so we do all that. It's obviously a big passion of mine now, but I'm grateful I got woken up at a young age, and it hasn't been about my health. I was obsessed with my racing and physical health, you could say,
Yeah.
physical performance. I had to put all that aside. I'm so grateful that Jesus made it clear to me, seek first the kingdom, and these things will be added to you. My health got added to me, and I'm so grateful for that. It did take some effort, but the same things I was passionate about human performance and racing, getting into the details of power on the bike and mileage and all this stuff, he used that same vigor, that same desire, the same passion, and redirected it towards actual health. And I see, physical health without spiritual health, also, we were talking about earlier, doesn't really get me excited.
No.
When I get to see someone heal physically, because I get to observe that all the time. We get to see miracles, people would call it. But I see someone heal physically and there isn't a spiritual change, or there's no spiritual part of their life. It's kind of like seeing the world in black and white. It's like watching a black and white movie. When I get to see someone heal and evolve spiritually and grow closer to the Lord, like that is seeing it in color. That is what I know I'm called to. And that's what God did for me. And I know he wants to do it for others too.
All right. So you make the decision not to get the surgery. What did you start doing first? What is the first thing that you said? Oh, wait, what? You said the neighbor was into holistic healing or something? Or
yeah, I went to...
What's the first thing you did, and then go for the journey from there?
Yep. So from there, in the hospital too, someone told me about Bulletproof Radio, which is another podcast, which I mentioned earlier. Dave Asprey, kind of this longevity biohacker. He's the guy, he calls himself the father of biohacking. And I look up to him a lot. I think he's kind of changed his tune a little bit more into like, I'm going to live to 180 and I'm fine. He can seek that. But early on, he was dealing with his own autoimmune condition, mold issue, Hashimoto. So he had a lot of really like health driven podcasts on, guests on early. And I started eating it up. I was like, whoa. Even Dr. Mercola was like, have you had your vitamin D levels checked? I lived in the Pacific Northwest. I hadn't, I've been on this journey for 2 years. No one looked at my vitamin D. That sounds too simple, but
Isn't that crazy?
It started planting these seeds that, hey, there might be. And I started listening to that podcast like the day or two before I had that surgical consult. So I was like, there's something in here. God's stirring. He's giving me this information. That was actually, shout out to this random Army Green Beret captain. I still don't know who he is. He was, had a broken leg while I was in that performance center, that when that Doc Haight talked to me, while I was waiting to go to the hospital, this guy with a broken leg who was rehabbing was like, hey, I heard you had an autoimmune condition. I don't know you. You should check out this podcast. And he told me about Bulletproof Radio.
Come on.
And I have no idea. Hopefully this guy is like thriving in life, but he was just in there to rehab his broken leg, and totally planted the seed that, 12 years later, there's fruit in my life from that. So never discount what you say to a stranger. Like, that guy didn't know me. It's kind of, especially in the medical field, this whole idea of like HIPAA or patient privacy. While that is something we take very serious, not talking about someone else's health, oh my goodness, like we see magic happen, let's say in our IV room where we do IVs at the clinic. We have 6 chairs now. It's like sometimes the right person sits next to the other person. They get to encourage them, inspire them. And even in my own journey, I did some IVs at this one clinic downtown, and I sat next to a guy with prostate cancer, and he was told he had months to live. This was 10 years later from high dose vitamin C IVs. And, it's something we incorporate now in our clinic, but I sat next to people that inspired me, and I've seen the magic happen when we share our weakness. Like, I share my health journey a lot, and even the things I'm still struggling with, I share that with the young guys that God's put in my life to encourage now, and not like to the point of glorifying like, oh, I'm broken and I need help. It's to say that we're on this
that's
journey.
not your identity and the victim card and love. No.
I would say instead that every act of courage, I like to think about this. Someone shared this with me, I think outside of the faith context first, but every person, let's say, that has the Medal of Honor, what do they all have in common? People say courage. Yes, but they also had to make themselves vulnerable in order to show this courage that they did have in them, but it had to be a vulnerability. And I think being vulnerable is one of the most important things that God's allowed me. I think before it was hide it, show it. And some people would energetically believe that, me like kind of storing up all these things, I can do it on my own. I can protect myself. Eventually came out in a way that, well, I can't hide this anymore, through my gut. I don't know if that's true or not, but it doesn't really matter. God used it to show me that I needed to be healed physically and spiritually. I needed his help, and he's come every time. That I've seen other people do it too, right?
Yeah.
This is a repeatable thing that, is it the same formula health-wise? No, there's some principles. I believe that God designed us to heal, from chronic conditions. Yes, people want to bring up the random genetic thing, and we should talk about that too. But really, the 90+% of what people are struggling with, dealing with, dying from are chronic conditions that if we align with the way God designed us, we are able to heal. And no one told me that for the first few years of my journey. Once someone in San Diego, actually, I started doing this holistic stuff. I heard podcasts, but I would still be in and out of the hospital. I'll still jump, I'd get a little bit healthier instead of being 2 months before I need to go back to the hospital and get a bunch of meds and fluids and blood transfusions and stuff. It would be like 3 months, and it was 4 months. It started growing, it started getting better. But then I moved here and still wasn't healed. Was actually going to go to Liberty University in Virginia. There's a medical school there. That's a Christian medical school, basically. I thought God was leading me there. Again, he kind of convinced me to stay through this military ministry that I believe that continues to thrive, and he allows me to be a part of, which I'm really grateful for. But no one had actually said that, like, you are designed to heal, until I met a doctor named Dr. Lisa Perry. She teaches for Institute for Functional Medicine, but was leading a course basically at the school I graduated from, Bastyr. I ended up going to the student clinic, kind of like, hey, I think I got this figured out. I'm gonna do my own health stuff, but maybe they could help me. They were naturopathic doctors there at Bastyr University in Sorrento Valley. Dr. Lisa Perry was the first one that said, you can heal. My daughter had Crohn's. She no longer has Crohn's. And her daughter's a doctor actually at UCSD, Dr. Portera, Ariel Portera. She's awesome. Works in their integrative field. But she actually was the one who was like, hey, you can heal. And she was the first one that told me to, from a non-spiritual sense, like my Bible study friends and church friends over here, health people over here. She actually, I don't even know if she's a believer, but she said, I told her about, I moved here for faith and live with these guys and stuff. She's like, lean into that, push into that. That's what's going to make a difference.
Wow.
And she knew that because she knew spiritual health mattered. She didn't necessarily know what to tell me, but she knew it mattered. And she's the first one that pointed me to that. We started working on my head actually with craniosacral therapy and doing different brain-based stuff. The more I worked in my brain, the healthier my gut got.
Wow.
We did some gut stuff too. And then God really used a fecal transplant. Someone prayed over me that I was going to get a fecal transplant. So I got a fecal microbiota transplant in 2016. And that was...
What does that mean?
Like they basically took a healthy person's stool, put it into my colon via colonoscopy up at UC San Francisco. I was medically approved to get it in part because
That's crazy.
It's crazy, yeah. But it's about as natural as it gets.
What?
Yeah. And all that research has kind of fallen apart because of COVID, because theoretically you could have, there was really great research going on for inflammatory bowel disease and fecal transplant. Something like 90% remission rate for patients with severe ulcerative colitis. Steroid refractory is what they called mine. Severe ulcerative colitis. Like basically you're not responding to corticosteroids, which are like this just like shuts down inflammation in the body. I was still sick even after getting steroids, right? They shouldn't. Anyone that takes steroids should be like, no inflammation. It's not good because you probably need some inflammation.
Right.
I know you recognize that with some of the modalities you use, but basically fecal transplant, I went from the 20, 30 bloody bowel.
How do they get it in there, bro? Like,
we'll get pretty good. It's funny. I was on another podcast. Shout out to Flip Your Friday. Not medical at all. My buddies Win and Casey.
And Casey,
and they're great.
He's been on mine too.
Oh no way! I'll have to watch the episode. Funny enough, Win, and we shared this on the podcast. He also has ulcerative colitis. I've gotten to help him in his journey, but Casey just didn't want to talk about poop. And I'm like. Both of us are like here in part.
He's a little high maintenance. We
love Casey.
Yeah, no, I love that guy. He's amazing.
Yes, and so Win kept asking questions about fecal transplant, like how do you heal your gut? And Casey's trying to get me back to like anti-aging and skin and and things that are very important, longevity and joints and how do I age well? As a former athlete, how do I protect my brain and get back what I lost maybe in years of training and whatnot that he's been through. Win is recently more like healed from his gut stuff, and he's doing great now from what I can tell. And he just allows me to share. We again talked about it on the podcast, but through that though, I guess I'll get a little deeper because you want to know. But they basically,
pun intended.
At the time, I think it was Open Biome was out of Boston. They were paying healthy college kids to not drink, sleep well, do all these things, and if they donated their poop, they'd get like $100 a week if it was enough and it was good. So hey, check it out. There's probably some. It might even still be Open Biome, but. If you got any college kids on here, have them listen. You're making hundreds of dollars if you have good poop and you haven't had a lot of antibiotics, maybe you haven't had.
Yeah, but that's vaccines. A deal breaker if they can't drink.
Drugs. I have to look, and that's where. So the studies when COVID hit was really on.
What college student's going to sign up for that?
Yeah, I think it was at Tufts University.
There ain't no money in the world worth not partying. Anyway, go.
No, yeah, I don't know. So that's where they got it from. There's though, people that will do home fecal transplant, and they'll get it from a healthy baby, not vaccinated, no antibiotics.
How do they get it in? Did it go up the thing?
So they did mine via colonoscopy. Yeah. So like 6 feet up, put it all the way at the terminal ileum where the large and small intestine meet.
What?
And the cool thing was, that's why I have objective data. I have a whole slideshow if you want to see it, but
I don't get that far.
So my colon was completely damaged after one treatment. That was September 2016. I went back December. Almost all of it had healed from one treatment.
From one?
And they ended up doing another one, and that was colonoscopy. So the more outpatient way, and I don't oversee this right now. I have a colleague, Dr. Mark Davis, who's incredible at this on the East Coast. You can actually take a baby is easy because they have a diaper. You can literally take it out, mix it in a blender you use only for that, and put it, and you should be screening the patient, the donor, for the obvious things like E. coli and C. diff and the obvious infections, any blood in the stool, theoretically you could transmit like a sexually transmitted disease. Again, they screen for all that in the open biome, but the research in 2019-20 when COVID hit was at that point of like looking at the optimal donor. Because I actually do believe, like kind of like a heart transplant, there's studies showing like if someone gets a heart transplant, I mean, that's incredible how that we've figured out how to help people live, right? But they say you actually take on some of the emotions and things of the person you took their heart on. So that's like proven through some of the organ transplants. From a fecal transplant, you're like, is it really? But the gut's the second brain. So I actually do believe, like, I had 2 fecal transplants through UC San Francisco. They were only trying to prove it was safe. But they actually was not only safe for me, but it was effective. So I signed up to be in a clinical trial. What was unique is that it was an open label trial, because clinical trials, unfortunately, get to the point where it has to be double blind. So they could have just put me asleep, did a colonoscopy, and not told me if they put water or fecal transplant. Or fecal matter for that matter. Thankfully, mine was like guaranteed to get fecal transplant, because I don't know if I would have signed up if I was just like, okay, 50% chance you don't get it. And I don't know where. Hopefully there's some clinical trials. There were some in other countries. So I went on clinicaltrials.gov, and you can actually look up and find clinical trials for any condition that you're dealing with. And it's usually, you'll see, it's usually in other countries, but that's starting to change. There's clinical trials that are ongoing for stem cells, for, things that are newer than doctors would even say. Even my top integrative functional medicine doctors I saw were like, fecal transplant, it might help. But the Lord, again, someone prayed over me. My friend's dad prayed that I would get a fecal transplant. At the time, they were only doing them in Australia. I think there was one clinic in England and possibly one in Canada. So I was in Southern California. I'm like, only supposed to be there for a few months. I'm like, how am I going to go there and go to school? And
this is unbelievable.
Yeah, it changed my life. So that's,
hold on. Like, how long? Because you're going to, you poop it out, right? Fast. So like, how did that heal it so fast? Talk to me here.
Yeah. Shout out to my friends, Pat and Francis. They actually drove me, 2 guys that are EOD techs now. They were dropped from buds at the time. They actually, there was this whole challenge, right? I had to get to San Francisco, but colonoscopy, you get put out. Yeah. Right. So you literally can't, you can't drive yourself to the hospital, because it's a factory, right? Colonoscopy just gets you in and out. I probably could have found a way, but they basically said you have to have a driver. I'm like, I don't know anyone in San Francisco. I had one like high school running teammate, didn't get a hold of him. I'm like, okay, these guys were like, let's go. They just put me in the car. We drove from here up to San Francisco. They dropped me off, did a drive to the Golden Gate Bridge and back, 3 hours of getting colonoscopy, whatever, getting the fecal transplant. And I remember they put me in the back of the car. I woke up like halfway home to here and was like, I think I'm better. I mixed bowel movement. There was no blood in it. Like,
wait. Okay.
Yeah. It was like overnight.
So they put the fecal in there.
Yeah. Put me asleep, put me under.
How does that help? And then, but then that fecal matter is going to go out your intestines.
Yeah. Eventually.
Like pretty quickly.
Eventually. Yes.
Like within a day.
Yeah. So it's like probiotics on steroids.
That's
like,
nuts.
It's crazy. Yeah. It's pretty nuts. And, I'm not recommending it necessarily, but
yeah, I don't think anybody's gonna line up for this one, bro.
I mean, well before getting your colon removed, though, before having a colostomy bag.
Bro, this is unbelievable.
Yeah, and so that's where, again, I kind of share that because that was the catalyst that moved me past being that sick. I still had like 8 to 10 bowel movements a day. Yeah, that's where peptides really came in. So peptide therapy.
Hold on. Go back. Fecal transplant. Where did you hear about it? Was it the podcast that?
Good question. So there's the thing that it's approved for. You can go to UCSD and get fecal transplant, but you have to be usually dying.
How did you hear about it? Who suggested it? How do you?
So Clostridium difficile. It's a deadly bacteria, C. diff, if you've heard of it. Okay. It's usually considered a hospital-acquired or nosocomial-acquired illness. It's similar to UC, just pooping out profusely like watery diarrhea for like 20 bowel movements a day. Some people, anyone that's had C. diff can know it's probably one of the worst things. Ulcerative colitis for me was even worse. It was that plus blood.
Oh,
really
God.
But C. diff, every time I'd go to the hospital, of those 9 times or so, they would screen me for C. diff because, well, one, until they could screen me, I got to have my own room. In the military, sometimes they just chuck you in 8 people in a room. But C. diff, thankfully, allowed me to have my own room. But C. diff is deadly. The top reason C. diff occurs is because of antibiotics. You get C. diff because your body gets wiped out of good probiotics, and then the weeds come back faster. Clostridium difficile is considered a weed, and it can kill you, unfortunately. And it happens. There's, I think, a few thousand deaths a year in the U.S. from C. diff. Recurrent C. diff, the top treatment now is fecal transplant. So if someone has 3 or more positives, not the first one, not the second one, not until you have 3 or more positive and you've tried to take antibiotics to treat an antibiotic-acquired disease. It's a whole crazy thing about the medical system. But recurrent C. diff is the only FDA-approved reason for fecal transplant in the U.S. right now. There's probably about 10 other things it could almost for sure treat, such as ulcerative colitis. But I actually had a positive C. diff, and that led me on this whole journey of, I was in the hospital, I was pooping out blood, I screened positive for C. diff. And this was on I was like probably taking probiotics at the time, who knows why. And they're like, oh, you have C. diff. You should go home and take this antibiotic. I'm like, wait, no, this is the same. This is like my 6th hospitalization. I have the same symptoms, but this time the test was positive. So they're treating the test, not the person. So instead of treating me the way they had all the other times with, anti-inflammatories, corticosteroids, they're like, aha, this is C. diff. And it wasn't C. diff causing the ulcerative colitis, but it was a weed that, because my gut had actually started to heal a little bit, was allowed to implant, and C. diff was positive. Took the medication for 2 weeks called Flagyl, metronidazole, cleared the C. diff, went back to the hospital because I was still sick. It didn't actually help any of the symptoms, but I got rid of the C. diff. And I say C. diff because we all have some amount of Clostridium in our gut at any given point. It just usually isn't producing what's called toxin A, and it's this whole thing. C. diff, though, led me on this journey to try to think, okay, and then I got C. diff, I think, again, or positive. The second one was like, they still were like, oh, you can't get fecal transplant. Because I started asking, I was like, hey, this thing could be treated.
They're the ones who brought it up?
Yeah, well, they told me, well, someone mentioned it to me. I forget who it was. And I looked up this doctor, Dr. Mark Davis. He was in Oregon at the time. And I called him. I'm like, hey, can I drive down and talk to you about fecal transplant? He's like, actually, the FDA is kind of like chasing me out of here. And I was down in Mexico, and actually he's now on the East Coast. He's a great guy. I actually just saw him this weekend in D.C. Dr. Davis was like, hey, you should definitely try to find fecal transplant. I can't help you. And then I left Washington and still didn't get healed and all that. Went down to Southern California. I shared this with a friend. His dad prayed over me when I was visiting. Forrest Brown's dad, I forget his dad, Dr. Brown. He's a medical doctor who was more holistic minded. Prayed over me. And he was like, yeah, I don't know, you might have to go to Australia because that's what God told me while I was praying for you. And I was like, I didn't have a lot of healing prayer in my life. I'd been prayed over a few times, but it was like that multitude of events that then I jumped on clinicaltrials.gov, found that UC San Francisco had just opened a clinical trial. I called them. They're like, how are you going to get here? I'm like, so I actually flew up for the consultation and back in the same day. Said, look, I'm desperate.
Flew to where?
San Francisco.
Okay.
So I flew up there, talked to them, found it online, flew back. It was this whole thing. It should be readily available. If you search right now, fecal transplant or FMT and ulcerative colitis, you'll probably find 100 studies open, which is good. Most of them are for kids, because kids with I can't imagine what I dealt with in my early 20s. If I was in middle school, high school, like the amount of because I had, up until a few years ago, and even still, my wife sees it every once in a while. I have like a bathroom accident. It's right now. It's every 6 months, whereas it was every day for a while. I was wearing diapers. It was
good. Lord.
It was pretty. Again, being vulnerable with you. Most people now see me as the the healer, the health side of it. It's like I had to go through that. I had to be brought to my lowest of and that's really why I'm just grateful every day, because there's days where it would be like I was nervous, there's this and that, and then once I'd have a bathroom accident, I just have this peace. And actually, what's cool is like now, not really now, but for the next 10 years of my beginning of my health journey, every day was a blessing. So I have to get up about an hour early to kind of get things moving and confidently leave the house. But it was that time I'd read the Bible, I'd pray, I'd worship, and I'd be in the bathroom 5 or 10 times, but then I didn't have to go the rest of the day.
Crazy.
So that was the middle ground of like not healthy, but not sick. And then fecal transplant and then peptides are really what have shifted things more than, there's been other tools, functional medicine, supplements and things that have certainly helped. And I certainly incorporate some of that, but peptide therapy has been the first thing that's made a durable change. I've used about 40 different peptides at this point. So there's not just a one or this or that. There's some that are incredible for tissue level healing. There's some that are more for, like you said, certain hormones like growth hormone. There's some that are more for neurosynapses and developing the brain. And I love peptides. There's about 7,000 different ones.
I was going to say, okay, let's break it down. Okay, let's get going here.
Okay.
I can't
So
stop.
I'm healed. I'm good.
The fecal matter thing is the fecal transplants. Just I can't even, like, in the time that it transports through your colon, it's healing you.
I guess so.
Like, what is that?
No, I mean, they know
That's
from
nuts.
animal studies, you can change the microbiome. It's really the only predictable way, right? We try to take probiotics. We do all these stool testing in natural medicine at times. I don't do that many stool tests. I think I've ordered less than 10 this calendar year, because people come a lot of times wanting to know what their microbiome is. I don't think we're quite there where we understand the microbiome to the point that we can, and I could be wrong. There's some doctors out there doing great work with stool testing, objectively changing things and getting good results. I usually see, though, Jesus said in John 10, my sheep know my voice and others, they will not follow. Like, if we focus on health, then like the weeds, the things that are wrong with the gut will get healed. If we work on having the body give it all the resources it needs, it will figure it out. And yeah, the stool test and the changes will be obvious on objective testing, but I usually only about 50% of my patients need objective tests to know that they're healing. I still run blood work on everybody, but I don't do a lot of those hundreds, thousands of dollars of extra testing unless we need to. And I do that eventually if someone's like got the resources and wants to go to the moon, I call it. They want to be an astronaut, but there's also like 90% I think we can get to with pretty standard, I say standard functional medicine blood testing. For a few $100s, I can get a really good picture of where you're at and then figure out, we might track some of those over time. But even if we're treating the gut, I still want to make sure your hormones are great. I want to make sure your sleep is great, and look at objective markers for that. So anyway, the stool testing, the fecal transplant in animals, we know that it's the main way. It's really the only way, predictably, to change the microbiome. We can take, there's a ratio of something called Bacteroides and Firmicutes. There's a bug called Akkermansia. There's certain other bugs that we know we need. So they're until COVID, trying to figure out the optimal composition of the gut to then transplant, have like those donors, be like, that gut's great. And so you can kind of tell if someone has a great gut, but I think you should also, if I could go back, I would love to have like screen my donors myself.
Yeah.
And get like, not just the stool they have, but like the intelligence they have, the mindset they have. Like maybe you pass on some of that, but in animals, you actually can put the biggest studies that people reference are you can put a overweight, obese mouse's microbiome into a skinny, healthy mouse that's running on a treadmill every day doing their thing. And that rat will become lazy, overweight. And the opposite can be true too. You put the lean, fit mouse's microbiome. So that's kind of the one that's gotten the most interest. There's been some studies on neurodevelopmental challenges in children. I don't treat that myself necessarily, but fecal transplant and autism has been discussed. And there was a bunch of promising, like, if you're dealing with that as a parent, like, you're trying to try anything. If you can do something fairly non-invasive, fairly safe. So mine was the colonoscopy. The most common way it's done now is via enema. And people give themselves enemas all the time, which is kind of crazy. I don't, but work at one clinic that called Optimum Health Institute in Lemon Grove that does colonics and all this stuff. Really cool stuff, but fecal transplant can actually predictably, durably change the gut. Your microbiome can actually shift. Whereas probiotics, other things, they might help. And I'm probably heresy. I'll probably have some supplement companies mad at me for saying that, but we don't know. Like even the best ones, like there's some megaspore, there's spore-based probiotics, there's 100, 200, 500 billion. We don't know if they're surviving the gut.
Right.
The stomach acid, we don't know if they're getting to where they need to get to. Some probiotics can make you worse because they're getting fermented in the small intestine. And so I actually don't use that many probiotics, even though I treat a lot of gut health.
Yeah.
I do a lot more with the gut barrier. So 70% of your immune system sits around the gut. And there's only one cell that's dividing that. And it's your own epithelial layer of your gut. So I focused almost all my work usually on the gut barrier for both immune challenges and gut specific challenges.
And how do you do that? How do you?
There's a number, but BPC 157 is kind of the most famous. Most people know of body.
This is a peptide.
Complex.
Peptide.
Yep. This is
I take that one daily.
Yeah, and there's different ways to deliver it. There's even sprays. There's capsules.
Say that one more. So BP 157.
Yeah, body protein complex 157 was kind of I call it the gateway peptide because there's just so many cool potential positives and there's almost no negatives. I'm sure talk to your doctor. Don't just start BPC because you can find it. And I do think the sourcing matters. I think this is a big topic of right now when he's talking about peptides. You can go on and get research chemicals and some can be good. The standardization really matters. That's really what we're pushing for at the federal level and working with compounding pharmacies ideally and still keeping them affordable. That's really the push to make things affordable and effective. And that's one reason I'm aligned with you is like the first thing you said about is that, hey, this my recovery place here, Real Deal Wellness
Yep.
is actually affordable. There's something that this is going to be, we can take this to the masses, not
Yeah.
only for the, the patients that, whatever we want to say. Same
Yeah.
with my clinic. That's really what I pride myself on, is that we are the most affordable and effective functional medicine clinic in San Diego and hopefully in the country. Because I do help people all over the country, and and that's always going to be
And
different.
the name of again, Trinity.
Trinity Naturopathic, and I
Yep.
share that because a lot of my colleagues and they're amazing at what they do, and we also just get booked up really quick. Like I said, I'm booked out till July.
What does that mean? Like the amount of patients that you can see on a daily basis, you can't even see anybody till July.
Yeah, most people are only seeing 5 to 6 patients a day because they're going really deep. We're getting to know you, like hour and a half initial, 2-hour initial visit, going through all your childhood trauma and gut microbiome, and that's worth it. And I love doing that, and I also love my colleagues who do that. We decided, and I'd done that for the first few years of my career, and I also helped in more acute stages. I've been seeing natural medicine doesn't have to be slow medicine. We should be able to see a change even that day. My hope is that in my office, whether it's by praying over someone, whether it's by an injection they do that day, methylene blue, whatever, we'll do something to change their physiology that single day, and and also check and figure out the root cause and go deeper. But I found that we do initial visits now for about $100. We call it our optimization visit. Look, for $300, $400, $500 that most of my colleagues that first see a patient doing, there's a lot of promise, but also puts a lot of pressure on us to have this perfect plan. I'll tell you, I've given people perfect plans, I would say, as close to short of, what the Lord's led me to. I prayed over it. I researched everything, and people didn't get better. And so I'm like, for $300, $400, for hundreds of dollars, plus thousands of dollars of testing potentially, I'd rather say for $100, I know in a half hour, 45 minutes that I can leave you better than I found you. I can point you towards, maybe you're doing great. I point you back towards, what lifestyle things. Maybe you need a little bit more. Maybe we start with one peptide. Maybe we do a really deep blood test, stool test, food sensitivities. Maybe we do that full test, but for $100, I can help make that decision.
Yeah, tell me what do they get for $100? They get a blood test that tests for the top things.
No, we don't do no blood tests for $100. There's nowhere in the area doing that.
Right. Okay.
The going rate for like
what's the $100 get you when they come in?
$100 is an initial visit where I go through all your past medical history. We do something called a functional medicine screening questionnaire where I get to know kind of not just what you're mainly coming in for, but also kind of all areas of your body, whether you have sinus issues, but that's not the focus because you're pooping out blood, kind of thing. Like I want to know everything. In that visit though, we might peel back one layer. You know what? The top thing you're dealing with is brain fog. Okay, here's the 10 or so tests. I'm going to test hormones and vitamins and inflammatory markers on everybody because the signaling molecules, to simplify hormones, right? So estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, IGF-1, growth hormone, like these are signaling molecules that God designed us with that we generally understand where they're made and where they're going in the body generally and what effect they have. They're usually large signaling molecules that 200-300 amino acids long. Peptides are smaller, 20, 30, up to potentially 40 amino acids long. There's about 100 hormones in the body, probably about 30 that are relevant to health. We test most of them when I do that blood work. Most doctors...
100 hormones?
There's about 100 things that would be called hormones in the body. But there's things like serotonin.
Like dopamine, I was going to say serotonin.
Those are technically neurotransmitters, but they could be called neurohormones because it's complicated. So neurotransmitters flow through nerves, which is really simple. Hormones flow through the blood. That's really all. An endocrine hormone is something that is made, let's say, in the testes and flows to the muscles. That's testosterone. Right? Someone can be made in the pituitary, luteinizing hormone, and it made in this little gland in the brain, flows to the testes or to the ovaries in females, changes, it does something else. So a hormone is something that travels through the blood. There's a lot of them. Some aren't as easily to test or as relevant to health. Somewhere between 20 and 30 are like easily testable. We know what they do. 7,000 peptides that we now are aware that exist in the body. We don't know what most of them do.
Okay, so let's make that clear. Peptides already exist in our body.
Yeah, so not everything that's sold or marketed as a peptide is always a naturally occurring peptide. So there are technically a peptide is anything 40 amino acids or less that is a structure that exists. And so this is where biochemists will kind of pick mine apart. Again, there's about 40 that I know of, and I always use the ones that I know are naturally occurring. There's some that are natural compounds like NAD. NAD plus is an amazing tool. That is not technically a peptide from my understanding. It's more of a activated nutrient, but it's not the same as like taking B12 because it's not orally bioavailable. Glutathione is not a peptide, but it's a great nutrient. There's one that I'm using now called SLU PP332, which is a lot of people think is a peptide. It's probably not by the definition, but small molecules. A lot of people are talking about biologics or small molecules are really what I think I end up employing, to be overly broad. But peptides, the cool thing about peptides, there's about 5 different main categories I use. There's tissue specific peptides, there's immune modulating peptides, there's growth hormone peptides, there's mitochondrial peptides. That's kind of the most interesting category right now, is mitochondrial health. And a lot of what we're doing with intentional cold exposure, heat shock proteins, like you're changing the way your body's making mitochondria. The density
red light therapy.
Red light therapy is a game changer. Yep. So, and utilizing that in the context of peptides is really cool. Methylene Blue with red light, like there's so really, and I share all this. So the foundations of health are key: sleep, nutrition, hygiene, light.
And I'll break in. Sleep's number 1.
Yeah.
Right. There's foundation of health and wellness, because I preach this in my mattress store, which is why I renamed it years ago to Real Deal Sleep.
Yeah.
Because I'm a sleep specialist. I help people maximize, because sleep is, all this stuff is great, but would you agree sleep is the number 1 thing that we have, the foundation of health and wellness?
Amen. Yeah. There's a Navy SEAL doctor, former SEAL, Doc Kirk Parsley. I don't know if you've run into him, the sleep doc. He lives in Texas and Arizona now, but he's a kind of a mentor from afar for me, because he's called the sleep doc. That's what he's known for on the SEAL teams. And he had every tool available to him. He was, using hormones and whatever. First thing he does, got to get them sleeping better. And that's so critical. That's not only, so the 2 things that sleep can do is, we think of the measurables are stage 4 deep sleep and REM sleep. And sleep, they're both very, very important. And really they should almost be in ratio, depending on how hard you train that day. But ideally, if someone's getting good sleep, they're getting over 2 hours of each.
Wow.
Most people aren't getting that.
No.
Most, if I look at it, and I'm kind of, again, meeting people that are pretty sick, if they're getting under an hour of REM sleep, their brain is not flushing toxins. They're not recovering. They will, potentially be developing neurocognitive disorders, but they'll be dealing with brain fog, fatigue, lack of emotional control and things throughout the day.
Yep.
And poor deep sleep, and these are overgeneralized. You need both. But if you're not getting deep sleep, you're not going to be physically recovering. You're not going to be making hormones.
Yeah, because REM sleep is rapid eye movement. That's when the brain recalibrates thoughts, brain, all that stuff. And deep is usually the first 25% of your sleep, which is when the physical body repairs itself. When when the 70% of the, and I want you to see if I'm accurate here, but when 70% of the body's natural HGH production happens. Exactly. That's why.
Yeah, growth hormone production, which we can measure through a marker called IGF-1. Yeah. Everyone should have that measured. It should be standard of care. I think even at the most expensive clinics, the cost is $30 to $50 to run that single marker. Now, most doctors, we're not going to just run a test. We're going to actually do a consult and discuss it. So depending on how, there's different business models on it, but I always say don't guess, test. Like, so everyone in that first visit, I'll meet with them, I'll get a feel, but some already have labs, right? And some be like, oh, I just got comprehensive labs. Usually they'll bring their labs in, even if it's from another good clinic, they'll be missing IGF-1. They won't have HSCRP. They won't have certain vitamins tested. They won't have free testosterone. Like the other guy the other day was like, man, I already got great comprehensive labs done. They were over 6 months ago, and the only hormone they had of all the ones we just mentioned was total testosterone.
That's it.
And it was in the 200s, and he's otherwise fairly successful guy in his 40s. So we definitely got to address that.
Yeah.
But the first step after we got talking, we're like, look, I could put you on testosterone right now. Like, it would be, there's a reason to, like, you have all the symptoms. Let's get a better baseline. That your blood work's a snapshot in time. Anything we do after that, we can still start TRT, but he's drinking every day. Like, there's things that we need to fix. Yeah. And I could try to say, nope, we got to do all that first. No, he's ready. If he didn't work with me, he would go find another place that's going to prescribe testosterone. I use testosterone. I've probably about 100 men's on. I've managed a few thousand men on testosterone. I love discussing hormone replacement. Yep. I do view that more as a placeholder so that the body can heal, getting someone back to how God designed them. And then hormones, and again, it's a feed forward, right? If you're not sleeping well, you're not going to be making testosterone.
Yeah, go back to give it, because you had said less than an hour. Of REM.
Man, people are not going to be functioning well.
Wow,
and
dude.
so sometimes,
now how do we track this? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so Oura Ring is probably the top tracker that you're wearing.
It's my favorite.
My wife has hers on right now. We'll see what her sleep score is. We'll check in. By the way, my life totally changed when I got married, and I'm so grateful for that. My sleep's better. My life is better. My wife's Sage. Met her through a church event. I wasn't involved at all with Awaken and doing mainly the military Bible study and helping with some churches on Coronado, and God just totally changed my life. But it's really been cool to see, like, Sage is younger than me. She's healthy. She's in her 20s. I'm old man in my 30s now, but let's go. And but she is really cool because she's super healthy, But once we started wearing the Oura Ring, like we got to see changes in her physiologic health. She started to be able to see, okay, if I'm stressing about this, or if I take magnesium, simple change.
Yeah.
Her alkaline phosphatase was slightly low. We added magnesium. She, it's kind of funny. She'd fall asleep and she'd be like a little bit like muscle twitching, right?
Yeah.
And that's overly contracted muscle. We don't need that all night. So
Right.
she was able to take magnesium glycinate, and
Yes.
we made one. And it's cool because like I kind of like use her and myself, right?
This is at night before bed, right?
Yeah. So we've watched her REM sleep go up just from adding magnesium. Again, not always going to be that simple. I like to
Right.
look at. I use,
What about zinc? Zinc
Zinc, yeah, zinc magnesiums. People talk about ZMAs. They can be amazing.
That's what I take every night.
Yeah, so zinc should be allowing your body to keep produce more testosterone potentially. It's a mineral that some people feel you have to get the right form. Some people can get some nausea from it. So like some people with gut conditions. So zinc is definitely not a one size fits all. Magnesium, at least 90% of people usually are magnesium deficient. It's hard to get enough, especially if you're training hard. So that's an obvious one. If you're dealing with any sort of gut issues, though, you want to be careful. There's about 7 different types. I don't love the combo ones. There's one like Magnesium Breakthrough. There's other ones, no specific brands, but I use pure encapsulations, mag glycinate probably the most often. I use magnesium threonate because it crosses the blood-brain barrier. Magnesium citrate can really help muscle repair or recovery, I should say, and bowel movements. So some people are struggling to have a morning bowel movement can take mag citrate. So magnesium is amazing. That's kind of more of a placeholder. You can get enough from your nutrition and lifestyle. But yeah, then
what does placeholder mean? Explain what you mean by that.
So let's say someone has such poor sleep, they wake up with jaw tension, especially as kind of a for whatever reason, a clinical pearl, I should say, like young doctors listening, like add magnesium. You'll see people with jaw tightness or even like grinding teeth. It'll go down right away. 200 milligrams or more of mag glycinate usually. I say a placeholder in the sense that your body should not be depleted of magnesium. It could be that they're not absorbing enough through the gut.
Right.
You could be utilizing more than you're bringing in. It's a placeholder in the sense that I don't believe anyone should be stuck on 10 different supplements a day. I love dietary supplements. I do think our soil and there's systemic level reasons why we don't have good minerals entering our body. Again, I usually test those before I prescribe. But with that said, I say a placeholder in that not everyone's going to take magnesium and all of a sudden have 30 minutes more of REM sleep at night. So, there could be past head injuries. There could be sleep hygiene where their room's not dark enough, cold enough.
Yeah, explain sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene is the things that you do to get better sleep.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think the obvious ones, we're designed to sleep in a cave in complete darkness.
Complete darkness.
From sunset to sunup. Less blue light at night is kind of a big one that we talk about, but most people don't really implement for usually about a year or two until after they are convinced. But at least blackout rooms, no flashing lights in the room, phone, if it's in the room, on airplane mode, no Wi-Fi. There's a lot of ways you probably have already preached and should have more sleep experts on the show. The piece on peptides I'll share that can actually heal, let's say, the brain. Many people, if you were to do an MRI of their brain, would have a calcified pineal gland. Whether it's from head injuries.
From fluoride.
Fluoride is a big one.
Wow.
Controversial. I had it. So I had a head injury that they did do an MRI on when I was in the Army. And thankfully that healed and, the brain bleed and I didn't have any major issues. But incidental finding, I was 24 years old and they said I had a calcified pineal gland already. And I had fluoride in my drinking water growing up. Who knows why? Other head injuries, other stressors. Bottom line is there's peptides that can actually decalcify the pineal gland. There's one called pinealon. There's epitalin. There's a few other small molecules that have the potential to. Again, I'm not here to make medical claims about peptides, but pinealon, I used myself and I slept amazing. Huberman talked about it with Dr. Craig Conover, and I think pinealon, especially if someone has low REM sleep, pinealon can be a great tool. If they have low deep sleep, usually I'm looking at their IGF-1. I'm usually maximizing growth hormone first because that's the most tried and true way to raise deep sleep. Yep. Usually people get 30 minutes more. And the challenging with a lot of supplements or valerian root,
what's the peptide that does it? Was it Samorlin?
I don't love Samorlin.
You don't love it?
Yeah, it's the kind of my least favorite in the growth hormone category. There's about 6 others that I like more. Okay. Biggest ones, CJC 1295 with ipamorelin is probably my favorite. More recently, testosterone has emerged as a really promising agent. And again, I can't make any of these claims. We guide people in peptide therapy. We don't prescribe them. There's a lot of details, and that's
you
changing.
Guide them.
I do at this point. I do recommend the best sources. That's really the key. I have people come in and say, "Oh, this didn't work for me."
But you sell them, right?
We do. Yeah, we work with them, and so Samorlin is the only one that was FDA approved in part because it's been around so long. The research is pretty clear though, about 3 to 5 times more growth hormone release in that first 30 minutes of sleep with CJC 1295 with ipamorelin. And the reason, again, go back to a little bit of physiology, the hypothalamus releases something called growth hormone releasing hormone. That goes from the hypothalamus to the pituitary to tell the pituitary to release more growth hormone. Growth hormone goes to the liver and releases IGF-1, which is fairly stable throughout the day. Long story short, we want to use Sermorelin really only works as a growth hormone releasing peptide. It stimulates the pituitary gland directly, which sounds good. The problem is that step before it, the hypothalamus really needs to be signaled to say, hey, release more growth hormone releasing hormone. CJC 1295 helps to do that. So you can dose that low with ipamorelin, which is basically a newer form of Sermorelin that can help your body release. Usually I'll see a 50 to 70 point rise in IGF-1, which we usually want over 200 for most of my athletes, but below 300 would be, there might be something wrong if something's over 300 with some sort of potential tumor forming cancer in your body. Maybe not, we don't know. It's a surrogate marker, it's a safety marker, but I test people that are functioning at a pretty high level, young military, older women, and there's no reason you cannot make good growth hormone for most of your life. It doesn't have to go down. Like women in menopause, right, their estrogen, progesterone production after they stop cycling will go down. That's predictable. Men, we will usually see a decline in testosterone. I do think a lot of that is more environmental, and we can talk about that. But growth hormone, I test men in their 80s that still have good growth hormone because they have good sleep. They haven't had major head injuries. But the cool thing, the unique thing about peptides, and specifically the growth hormone ones that can improve sleep, they often can have a durable change. So we can do 10 to 20 weeks of even Sermorelin, there's studies on, but I would lean more towards Testosterone, ipamorelin, CJC, some combination of those. We can actually see a rise in IGF-1, improvement in sleep, and a year later retest and still be above where they started. Yeah, that's what's unique. Whereas other tools that are placeholders like testosterone, like magnesium, like I said, I guess testosterone is probably a better example. While you're on it, we can do great. And I do think we're getting towards the point where we can see where peptides could play into raising testosterone. I don't think we're there yet. There's none that predictably raise testosterone nearly. Testosterone replacement is a great tool. If I was done having children, I'd probably be on testosterone this season of my life. There's some negatives potentially, but
let's go further, because I didn't do anything my whole life. No steroids, no nothing. No one's ever believed me when I say that. So my whole life, they never believed me. But I at 50 years old, because I knew my wife and I were pretty much done having kids, I started the day I hit 50. Nice. Testosterone replacement. Yeah. Okay. So, and I've referred over 100 people to my clinic, Catalyst Wellness. For testosterone replacement, well over 100 in the last 4 years, because I'm in 54 now. Okay. So anyway, the point is, let's start going on this, man, because when some people are like, oh, but you got to stay on it for the rest of your life.
I've helped more people. I've probably helped almost 100 men get off testosterone in the right season, use it for a season. I did actually use it for myself, and I'll share. It's easier to share my own experience, and I can share some patient stories without, I think, I've treated, thousands of men and women at this point. For my own journey, I did choose to go on it for a period leading up to my wedding, in part because I definitely didn't want my wife on birth control. And number two, I was still working a lot, trying to grind, and my levels were okay, 400 or 500, but my what's called my sex hormone binding globulin, which is a protein that your body makes that was binding up most of my testosterone, was high. It's really hard to lower that. There's a few reasons. I had really low luteinizing hormone when I first tested my hormones, closer to 28. I wish I had tested when I was younger. So post head injuries, different things, my pituitary wasn't signaling to make as much testosterone or sperm. So I went on some of the fertility meds, clomiphene citrate and clomiphene HCG. They can be great, and I use them with many patients, and many want to, at least turn that stone over, because if we go straight to testosterone, we may never know how a young guy could feel on one of those. And I say feel, there could be some negatives. One of the bigger negatives is that you can see IGF-1 growth hormone go down. Your pituitary can only make so many signaling molecules. So I, at least at a minimum, always take clomiphene in the morning, because we want to let the pituitary be, activated in the morning, but then by the evening, like growth hormone kick on. So that's a different discussion. But testosterone replacement, used it for 6 months. It actually wasn't that hard to get off. I mean, I felt amazing on it. I have now shifted most of my men to at least twice, if not 3 times a week injectable. I'm now using a mostly with a compounding pharmacy one with MCT oil in it. So it's instead of the grapeseed oil or cottonseed. So if you went to CVS, if you did have what's truly called primary hypogonadism, if I tested someone and it has high luteinizing hormone and low testosterone, it means that's similar to hypothyroidism in the sense that you're sending a lot of signals and they're not getting through. Medically, you usually have to be below 250 these days. to even have that discussion, but I've had patients that have
Testosterone level under 250.
Yeah, for
okay.
total testosterone, but
Total
is only tells me you're a male or a female usually when I test you, versus your free testosterone is really what matters. Free testosterone in nanograms per deciliter, which is how LabCorp reads it, we usually want between 20 and 25. We can usually get away with up to 30 to 35 for some of our athletes, people that want to go super physiologic. There is a curve though.
Can you parallel the two? Like
with total, that's usually around 900 to 1200. It's still a fairly broad range because sex hormone binding globulin could be as high as 70 in some men, as low as 8 in others. So the higher SHBG is, the lower free will be, even with a higher total. And that's usually stress, sleep, and alcohol are actually the three biggest things, and head injuries that drive up SHBG, and women's birth control or being around.
How bad is alcohol?
It's pretty bad.
We're getting on a tangent, but let's fire away here.
It definitely
get everybody that's drinking alcohol to take the edge off. I just need to take one or drink. Yeah. Tell them how bad alcohol is on every level.
Yeah, what I'd say is, get an Oura ring, get a Whoop band, watch your sleep scores plummet.
Yeah.
And that's the most objective way to test. Because I've had young military that want to get prescribed to them through the military, do an all night bender or whatever. One night, honestly, one guy his testosterone like doubled through that. So I was like, okay, that's not ideal. So that's a rarity. Yeah. Usually poor sleep, excessive, but definitely excessive alcohol, but even some alcohol will lower your testosterone and growth hormone production that single night. The main mechanism by which is that raising sex hormone binding globulin. Uniquely, red wine is actually an aromatase inhibitor. It can block some amount of estrogen production. It makes you feel like you have more testosterone for a little while. So there's some like details with alcohol that we need to discuss. But in general, we definitely weren't designed to be drinking at the rate that we are. I think that Jesus' first miracle turned water into wine. I'm not a zealot in terms of not drinking, but I think objectively we can test you versus you, right? And I run more advanced liver markers, one called GGT. I usually add to panels to just assess not just if your liver is actually getting damaged by alcohol, but all in the context of the 40 or so markers we test, I can usually point at least one thing that's not optimal if someone's drinking more than once a week. And maybe even that I could point to some things. And but I tell a lot of people they don't know how good they can feel, and a lot of times we'll use other things that can raise serotonin, raise dopamine. Methylene Blue is one of them.
Let's go on that one.
Methylene Blue,
everybody's talking about it right now.
Yeah, everyone's talking about it.
I saw something on Instagram.
Yeah,
this guy was saying it turns your brain blue. It's actually really bad. It actually doesn't. It actually hurts your mitochondria. Break down what it does, and again, this is not medical advice.
Not medical advice. Again, I think of Paul Saladino, carnivore MD. Got to meet him before he was famous. He used the term. He's an astronaut. He first guy to really do an animal-based diet, I would say, like very scientifically, and share his results. He then decided to leave the carnivore movement in part to add fruit, and he got ostracized. Anyway, Paul's great. He's an astronaut.
He got ostracized.
Yeah, but he's doing great. I like Paul Saladino. He's Dr. Saladino is living in Costa Rica. He has no EMFs in his life. Like but I'm really glad one of the first podcasts I heard of him, you could take any of his stuff out of context and probably even what I'm sharing today and be like, oh, that's crazy. This guy's this.
Yeah.
It's like in context, Dr. Saladino is an astronaut. He told me that early on in one of the first podcasts that he's going to the moon. When you go to the moon, actually, we've learned more about human physiology on the Earth when we've put astronauts in space, because you start learning about muscle breakdown, about catabolism versus anabolism, what compounds can protect the brain, protect muscle mass while you're not under gravity. So we learn stuff from the astronauts that apply to everybody.
Wow.
So I would say some of these discussions are a little bit astronaut. Not everyone needs to rush out and get methylene blue. There's definitely stuff online available, can be easily contaminated with heavy metals, especially arsenic can be pretty high in methylene blue.
What is methylene blue?
Methylene blue is not a peptide. Technically it's a pharmaceutical actually that was invented or patented, I think almost 100 years ago. And check me on that. It was originally discovered that it decouples oxygen from red blood cells. It's kind of the simplest way to say it.
And wasn't it actually a dye for like apparel or something? Right?
Genes dyes, but they use it in surgeries to light up the ureter. So it has an affinity. It goes to the urinary tract very quickly. So you can actually, if a surgeon doesn't know where the urinary tract lies between the kidneys and the bladder, you can actually give methylene blue intravenously and it'll show blue right there. Like that's where you're cutting.
Wow.
That's where you're working. So an anesthesiologist shared that with me a few years ago. Methylene blue, though, has gotten a lot of information on it because it seems like it can have some of the effects of hyperbaric oxygen in a pill. It can upregulate oxygen perfusion to the brain. it has actually a lot of the same benefits that nicotine has. So a lot of people,
Wow.
and then some people still use nicotine for performance. 10 years ago, Bulletproof Radio,
And we're going to, when we're done with this, we're getting on the nicotine thing, because I've got guys all around me doing the nicotine patches saying it's really good for your cognitive and all that.
Yeah, it seems like it increases oxygen to the brain, but it might decrease to the periphery. Like people that smoke, for example, are known to have more peripheral arterial disease. So could the same happen eventually through nicotine? I don't really know, but methylene blue is a much safer choice.
Okay.
And it seems that it's increasing oxygen to the brain. It's increasing the activity of something called cytochrome C in the electron transport chain. Craig Conover on Huberman's podcast did a pretty deep dive. Methylene blue is unique because it can be done intravenously. It can be done orally. So anything that can be done in a capsule is what you're seeing blow up right now, generally.
Okay.
The injectables are kind of like you and I will discuss, and we'll talk about Smorlin, but the masses are not gonna, like a shop like yours couldn't necessarily carry easily and teach people how to inject. And,
I've seen the one in the droppers. You can put the droppers in your water.
Yeah, so I've experimented with most types of methylene blue. Some of my colleagues are doing it intravenously in this area. I haven't yet. It's actually what I started using it for was for Lyme and mold toxicity. It can be amazing. Help people excrete mycotoxins at a rate that they otherwise wouldn't. Yeah, anytime you're detoxing.
Yeah, what does it actually do? Break down the science of it.
What it seems to do is it's an MAOI inhibitor, which first safety thing is you should never take it with any antidepressants, any other psych meds. It can be dangerous, can cause serotonin syndrome.
I've heard that. Do not, if you're taking antidepressants or anything like that, do not take it.
Yeah. So like at, Emerge this year, I may or may not have had some methylene blue. Some people may have been performance enhanced through methylene blue. Took it right before the games. And, it's not going to get you jacked overnight, but what I usually find fine motor movements, people like ultimate Frisbee, for example, throwing a perfect disc, like blocking a disc, like that's probably a good use of methylene blue. Most people are taking it for focus. People just feel more focused, more cognitive effects. It does it in a safe way. It's not a stimulant like Adderall. Could it replace Adderall for some? Probably. And it does so in a fairly safe way. I like the capsules. I think even Catalyst actually is now offering. So Strive Compounding Pharmacy, love Strive. They're doing great work around the country to advocate for patients. I started working with them 4 or 5 years ago when I was in residency, and no one was making methylene blue compounded. A few people are making it online. You can get it from weird sources.
First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for watching, for listening. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you, the feedback, the love. So if you want to support the show, we have a company, Real Deal Wellness. That's our wellness center. It's a membership base where you pay $99 a month, have unlimited access to red light therapy, cryotherapy, compression therapy, halo therapy, as well as massage chairs. Also, Real Deal Sleep's our mattress company. But again, we can't thank you enough for subscribing and for sharing the show. Continue to do so. We love you. Thank you. Have a nice day.
They took them over 6 months. I said, hey, you should look into this. Everyone's talking about it on the inner circles. It hasn't made it way out to the masses yet. Strive took over 6 months to find the right source. It said everything we've tested from every bulk supplier has at least one, if not more, heavy metals: arsenic, cadmium, a few others, lead in many of them. So because it binds, methylene blue is a low-level binder, not to the level of like glutathione or DMSO or these other things that excrete like bind onto heavy metals, but it binds some amount of toxins. It improves oxygen to the brain. It does help treat recurrent UTIs in women. It's one help. The only FDA approved reason it's used is carbon monoxide poisoning, which is pretty rare, but you get stuck in the garage with the fumes and people do die like in fires. Methylene blue can be incredible. Again, there's some contraindications. I don't love that it's now so available, but I think it's good. I think it's a net positive. Well, some people get injured by it, and then we'll hear that one story of,
of course,
just like, you talk about ivermectin, talk about things that, one bad thing happens in natural medicine or holistic medicine, whereas
that's the one that'll blow up.
Yeah. Medical error is the third leading cause of death, or iatrogenic causes, meaning.
Explain that medical error. I'm glad you brought that up, bro.
Yeah. I think it's
in our country, medical error.
It's somewhere in the top 10. People debate whether it's 2 to 10, I would say, but I've heard third.
I've heard third.
Yeah. I think there's heart disease, cancer, and medical error. I mean, the extreme would be, you go into a surgery, you're supposed to have your right kidney removed, your left one gets removed, and now you have no kidney function. Like that's like medical error, clearly. Another one is polypharmacy, where people get put on one medication that they weren't supposed to be. And that is, I think, the biggest concern with some of these natural compounds, right? Someone, great intentions, taking methylene blue, trying to focus more, get more down, be the better husband, whatever. But they're also on 2 different antidepressants, and they end up having serotonin syndrome and can't breathe and die. That's like worst case. So that's like very, very rare in non-toxic, non-invasive functional medicine. But in the medical field, there often are pharmaceutical interactions. There's, surgery has its own risk. We've anytime, even a colonoscopy, a routine colonoscopy that every single, person is recommended, usually at age 50, possibly earlier, given family
Yep.
history and other things. I've had, I think, 9 of them. Like I said, little did I know, not that I think God used conventional medicine to, save my life, keep me through the worst of it. But 1 out of 1,000 colons get perforated. Some people die from that,
Wow.
The process of giving birth in a hospital, like, has pretty high, unfortunately, mortality rates. Like, and is it only because of the birthing process that God designed and, part of the curse of the garden and original sin? But it's higher as high in hospitals as is in home births. So, and possibly higher in some studies. So again, there's different, it seems like the conventional system does a decent job keeping people alive, but maybe leads to other issues. You could look at some of the meds that deplete the body of bone mineral density, whether it's calcium or other things. Those meds for sure lead to osteoporosis. And we see anyone that has a fracture, post when that's older, their chances of living goes down dramatically. And then
Why is that? Like when the elderly have a broken hip, like what happens?
Yeah, it's kind of like a body in motion stays in motion, a body at rest stays at rest. Like, so once someone gets immobile, their bone density goes down even more, muscle mass, but definitely even just brain tissue wise. And usually people feel depressed. They get put on so it's hard to say the mix of like aging versus like actual medical error. But bottom line is it's not doctors themselves are not the problem, I would say. And they're a cog in the wheel. Many of them are very jaded, but they often have so many patients, so busy. Most medical doctors, MDs, DOs, and conventional field, they're seeing the worst of the worst. And especially in training, that's really my biggest knock on it. The training is so heavily sick care that they get that then they see the world through this sick care vision, that everyone they see is a walking case of C. diff, like I just shared, or they're about to die of pneumonia. It's like people do die of pneumonia, unfortunately. It's a bacteria that most of us could get, clear, have a little cough, and move on and be stronger because of it. So the medical system has kind of taught doctors to view the world from that lens, and they saw 3 to 5 years of getting brainwashed in residency. Again, great training. They get really good at saving lives, hopefully, but they see a lot of people die too. And they see like remdesivir, the early parts of COVID, right? We could get really into that. There's no one that would argue that ventilators that was early on and remdesivir were a good choice. That was their best attempt, and then those got incentivized by the medical system. Any patient that came in with COVID and you got them on a ventilator, the hospitals they thought they needed ventilators. So they asked, government and different places for finances to get those ventilators. And how do you prove that you need more ventilators? You put more people on ventilators. This is all 5 years later. This is Monday Morning Quarterback, but that is a decent example of medical error. We know now that
Didn't the ventilators like increase the chance of like
the cytokine storm and death and again, and remdesivir, the amount of kidney damage and eventual. So again, we were ignoring potential signals that there were other treatments available. But if they came out that were off-label drugs or even some of the holistic things, like some of the studies show that if someone had a vitamin D level over 50 nanograms per deciliter, that their chances of developing any sort of severe COVID was really low.
Vitamin D.
And am I saying vitamin D cured? No, but how many people were getting that tested at a minimum? That would have been way more important than stressing and all the things we end up doing. So I think there is a blend of both. I'm glad we have amazing, I think actually it's interesting in naturopathic medicine, functional medicine doctors, we have more alignment with emergency room and ER docs because they see the preventable stuff. 90% or more of what they see is like, we always see the gunshot wounds and the amazing things that they are really good at. Most of what they see is like, wow, that was a heart attack that could have been prevented if they were seeing, real deal wellness. They were coming to Trinity years and years before.
Yeah.
Or there could have been signals of that, we really need to work on this. Like I think the biggest one is insulin resistance that we can pick up early on.
Yeah.
50% of people over the age of 50 usually have at least one marker of insulin resistance, where now,
what does that mean?
Anytime someone eats a carbohydrate that's insulin resistant, they can no longer take that glucose, that energy, and put it from the bloodstream into cells to be used for energy. Unfortunately, we should be able to eat anything and basically convert it to either energy or building blocks, protein, muscle, fat, protein, fat, and carbs, right? So carbs, most likely is kind of the easiest one to point to because they're simple molecules, 6-carbon glucose molecules. Eventually, the pancreas has to pump out insulin all the time whenever we eat carbohydrates or certain too much glutagenic amino acids. And you say too much, but the right amount. If fasting insulin is high, it means that even after you're not eating for 10 to 12 hours, your body is still sending the signals to try to put that into cells, things that aren't, your cells are no longer responding. Every cell insulin should dock on, open up, say, feed me. Working out raises insulin sensitivity. GLP-1 peptides do it. There's a lot of things that allow this to happen easier so energy can enter cells. We want this, not in the gut. We don't want leaky gut, but in every other cell we want, our muscle cells, we want them to be able to take in glucose, the brain. Once someone becomes insulin resistant, you're sending all these different insulin molecules and they're not opening cells. So then we get extra glucose floating in the bloodstream. Glycating red blood cells causes a rise in hemoglobin A1C. Rise in fasting glucose is the obvious one that eventually when someone's fasting blood sugar is over 100, we say they have prediabetes.
Yep.
We could have tested insulin years before that and most likely seen a signal, hey, in a rested state, and that could be due to stress, could be not only nutritional or poor, even muscle function. There's a lot of reasons why insulin or glucose or even A1C could be high. The top one is usually nutritional, and most people know that, but we could have picked that up 10, 15 years sometimes before diabetes develops. And there's so many people that just kind of get told, well, it's pre-diabetic, not a big deal, but your cholesterol is high, you need to be on a cholesterol med. Insulin is often, high fasting insulin is often the spark that lights the flame that allows something like cholesterol to become oxidated, damaged, and get stuck into an arterial wall. It's the spark that often starts the fire. Some people would call cholesterol, for example, the firefighters that respond to that to actually try to soothe it, try to put it out. Or it's an issue at the liver that cholesterol can be a sign. But I very rarely see lowering cholesterol is a good thing. Whereas
lowering of cholesterol, where they tell you to lower your cholesterol.
Yeah.
Go on this, because this is now a thing where the doctors are like, oh, you got to have low cholesterol, when it's actually.
Yeah, low cholesterol, it can get really controversial. It's not a one size fits all, but if someone has, let's say, slightly elevated total cholesterol, just above 200.
What's above 200?
Let's say 220 would still get flagged. Anything above 200 now is getting flagged as high. But someone could be flagged as low or under, let's say 190, but have really low HDL, which is good cholesterol. And they could be told you're fine or, oh, it's not a big deal. It's usually when someone's over 200 for total cholesterol and over 120, but really over 100 even now for LDL, they're told you have high cholesterol. Again, some people that's concerning and we should talk about it. We should always talk about it. But if someone has slightly high cholesterol, high fat diet, is doing well overall, no joint pain, everything's going great, good cognitive function, and insulin is low, A1C is low, glucose is low, chances of this being any issue is actually pretty low. Usually I aim for most of my men to have good cholesterol or bad cholesterol, LDL between 80 and 120. Usually I actually look at what size is your cholesterol. Is it damaged or oxidated? Do you have sticky cholesterol? So there's way more details on cardiometabolic health. We can actually look at the coronary arteries, at the carotid ultrasound, and see, do you have actually any damage or plaque or calcium buildup in your arteries? Again, none of these are perfect.
You guys do this with an ultrasound at your clinic?
We don't do it as ultrasound. We refer out. There's a few different types of clinics. There's an imaging center we can do for a few $100 now, but there's some fancier ones too. So I do think cardiovascular risk factors are really important to know. Cholesterol is one of maybe 20 different markers that if someone really wants to do a cardiometabolic panel, I think we add that on for 150 to 200, depending on the markers we choose. It's not, so I don't test that on everyone because fasting insulin glucose is often, if you have a metabolic issue, which most people are not optimized metabolically, some are. I definitely tell, I'd probably say, I think I have a healthy user bias. People are paying cash to come see me. I would say I'd probably say 70% of people have at least one marker of metabolic concern, that I
70%.
Yeah. Whereas I think the studies in America is about 86 to 90% of patients have two or more, I think.
Is there a certain age group or?
That came out, I have to look at that study, but it was basically one or more markers of metabolic disease. So what we call metabolic syndrome is like 10 different factors: high blood pressure,
go into that.
High LDL, low HDL, high A1C, high glucose, high waist to hip circumference, so larger visceral abdominal fat. So those are pretty standard and understood. Metabolic syndrome is usually if you have 3 or more of those.
Yeah.
So I think they say 50% of people over 50 have metabolic syndrome in some way. With that said, I think 86% of all American adults have some chronic condition, I think is what I would, and some of that is
I
metabolism.
just read this
Yeah.
stat
I need to look at
this week.
carefully.
86%
That's the number, right? Yeah.
have at least one chronic condition.
Yeah, and I think that's
86%, bro.
And even so, again, I'm doing optimization stuff where I'm treating, top tier military, first responders, top, performers like you, and even then, 70% usually that aren't optimized yet come in. I would say there's at least one marker of metabolic specifically. Like they might still have gut issues.
And those ones that you mentioned, like the top ones.
Yeah, and again, that doesn't mean we need to treat it, but it might be because they have low testosterone. It might be because they're sleeping poorly. Like these are all, blood work is a clue. I usually tell people 50% of what I usually recommend is based on your blood work, 50% on what you're telling me. And some people are more data driven where they need to see the numbers change, and we might do more data driven treatment. And I say data in terms of blood work. I also say, your Oura ring will tell me just as much as blood work too. So
wow.
It can, in a different sense, right? It's gonna be different feedback, different mechanisms, but I love more data, but I have patients that honestly could care less.
Right.
And I often start treating empirically, then I use labs as more of a safety check along the way versus some really need to see that their insulin went down, that their thyroid, their free T3 went up, their SHBG went down, and their total testosterone went up. But if someone tells me, hey, my libido is better, me and my wife's relationship is better, I'm more who I'm called to be, and their testosterone only went up 10 points, then you know what? I'm not going to be the one that says, well, if there's research that says that marker should still be raised in order to prevent something, then we'll still have that discussion. But I care as much about how someone is operating and performing in the world, because I believe like even in the next few years, we'll change some of my opinion on this hormone, that hormone. I'm less of a definitive, this is what you need. I usually give people the menu of options. And most people that are in tune with their health do know what they need. They know, especially if they're connected with God, like not always, right? But I will be a guide. I'll shine light on things, and I'll often give them up to 5 choices. But hey, look, I think this is what I would most likely do, but here's what are the options that are the next step to optimize your health. And I view it as a relationship, right? So even if I gave someone all 5 of those walking out the door and they were all motivated and I gave a great, motivational talk and we got all going, a lot of times I'll actually not do all 5, even though it'd probably be better for my business right away, short term and all that, because it's a relationship that I know is going to be worth it if we do the best thing first and I get them connected with the right trainer, the right coach also. And then we start growing that way, or we get them in to treat their physical pain with massage, acupuncture, whatever else we're going to do. And we get them metabolically doing one thing. And then, it's 3 months from now, that's better. And now we can build on that. So I usually focus on energy throughout the day and sleep first, like you said. Yeah. And there's peptides that can help with that, or there's lifestyle changes, or both, right? Like these things work synergistically. That's the fun part. It's very rarely. Now people do have a finite, obviously, budget and ability. I always look at ways.
Does your clinic take insurance, or are you strictly cash?
We don't take insurance. That was one reason I was in DC this past week to advocate for naturopathic medicine. Then I am on what's called the Institute for Functional Medicine Certified Practitioner list. So I'm a naturopathic doctor licensed, but then I'm a functional medicine trained provider. And all that really means is that I speak a little bit more like conventional medical and root cause medicine within the, like MDs and DOs that want to get more holistic, they go and become IFM certified. Naturopathic doctors, a lot of them say we don't have to, like it doesn't add that much to our knowledge base, but it definitely adds to our network. And the IFM actually has their big conference here in San Diego. But I like functional medicine because it's a framework that allows us to think back through your whole timeline and look at the system as the body of a system of systems. I was a systems engineer minor in college, and it really helped me think through how is this all interacting, right? We might be treating your hormones, but see your brain health get better. Yeah. You might be treating your sleep and see your metabolic health get better, because the system, it all matters. You might be treating your gut permeability and you no longer have allergies you used to have, like to seasonal stuff, to outdoor things. So I really like that. And we could call that naturopathic medicine, call that holistic medicine. To me, functional medicine is probably the term that captures it the most. We don't take insurance, but we are pretty affordable. Some people, we can get their insurance, their labs that be covered by insurance, but we've gone away from that because some people get big bills, some will get no bill. Yeah. So we have a clear pricing structure. Usually, if I've been on a few other podcasts, I usually do offer like a code. We'll do we'll figure out a code that people can type in $20 off. Because I think right now we're doing $129 for initial visit with me or our female doctor. Dr. Autumn Dugas is incredible. She's also a believer. Her and her husband Josh moved here from Montana to join us, and we are going to most likely be hiring someone else too. But she does PRP or platelet-rich plasma, regenerative joint injections. We do hyperbaric. We do IV nutrients. If people definitely benefit from NAD or other things if they're not absorbing them through the gut to more quickly jumpstart their health. Again, that's not the long-term plan. I'm not going to have you come weekly for an IV for the rest of your life, but it could be I like to change someone's physiology enough to see a change in their performance and their lifestyle right away so that they have the energy, the inertia to start going to men's prayer, to get plugged in with their church, to actually love their wife and be a part of the family again or whatever. So I always it's usually the second or third visit, and maybe it's because I'm a younger, 5 years into my career. For whatever reason, it's that's where the magic happens. It's often I meet them, we talk through stuff, we check their labs. Sometimes it's then we figure out the thing that is it could be a barrier, it could be a limiting belief, it could be a spiritual thing that we need to pray for, but it also could be a clear nutrient deficiency, low vitamin D. They could have excess cortisol at night that we can use herbs for. We can help change their sleep hygiene. It's somewhere in that second or third interaction with a person where I feel usually the Lord or data or both gives us that wow, that's what this person needed to really set them up. Again, for me, I tried all these different things, and fecal transplant was the
unbelievable.
Switch. And then peptides are what allowed me to get off the last little bit of medications. And today it's I'm training for a high rocks competition. I think I'm gonna do the one in December, and it's I had never wanted to go run again. There's a peptide I'm using now that makes me want to go run. And
what peptide is that?
Okay, it's a compound. It's called SLU-PP332. It's probably my favorite. It's the first peptide that I'm aware of that's actually helping, because there's other lifestyle things, especially cold and red light especially, that's supposed to be helping turn on mitochondria and heal mitochondria, especially the outer mitochondrial membrane with red light,
which is the powerhouse of our cells.
Yes, and so SLU seems to be increasing the number of mitochondria per cell, the density. There's everything else is feeding the mitochondria, such as methylene blue, NAD. And red light's more repairing, and then there's something called SS31 that's repairs oxidative damage within mitochondria. But SLU-PP332 may actually be increasing the number of mitochondria. We have to make sure it's safe, and I'm not recommending it necessarily for anyone.
How are all these peptides? What's the best way to ingest them? Are you saying pill, injection?
Right now, SLU has gotten a lot of popularity because it's oral. So you'll see it'll be the next kind of methylene blue, the next NAD, most likely, because it seems to be very safe. It's orally bioavailable, so you can take one capsule either before workouts or every morning. I tried it in a liquid form this morning before this, and I do actually want to go work out now, which is kind of cool. But it also seems to just raise energy. It's similar to what people would feel from an NAD injection, but NAD, your body can make more NAD if you have more mitochondria. It's it's kind of like fuel for the mitochondria, and it's a feed-forward mechanism. NAD also seems to have some amount of autophagy benefits where you get some of the benefits of fasting without doing a 3-day fast. Yeah. So I love NAD. It's a great tool.
What are the ways to take NAD?
NAD,
because NAD is pretty expensive, right?
Yeah, I almost only use it IV or injectable. So we do, I think a bottle of NAD is around $300 for 1,000 milligrams, which has about 40 doses for the average person. Some people I dose a little bit lower. So I actually prefer lower between the sub-Q or it can be done intramuscular.
Yeah.
I usually like the injectable more than the IV for someone with chronic fatigue. But someone that's, let's say they're traveling a ton, they got to be sharp for this next thing. Honestly, I probably should have done an NAD IV yesterday to be ready for this because I got back from DC. I didn't sleep much, had a great time advocating for natural medicine with congressmen and senators over there. But it's a reset. It's boom, you're back. You should be grounding. You should be getting cold. You should be working out. Yeah. NAD will also help kind of jumpstart that.
Is that something you should be taking every day?
They say over the age of 50 that people do stop making as much of their own. Okay. But again, that's the average before people are getting red light and sauna most days, before they're exercising.
Okay, talk about, does sauna help with NAD? I do 5 saunas a week religiously.
It should help the amount of heat shock protein. Anytime you stress the body,
heat shock proteins. Yeah.
If you have the right things to rebuild the body, and I say that really generally, but muscle cells are probably the easiest to talk about because we'd have to do a muscle biopsy to measure your mitochondrial density and look under a microscope. But most likely, most exercise, most training, especially the right amount of intensity for you, should be breaking down muscle fibers. And we think of rebuilding muscle, right? But really think of it within every muscle cell that you're rebuilding the mitochondria within that, right? So if you're breaking down the muscle, you're obviously breaking down the mitochondria too. So we're not just trying to repair that muscle. We're trying to repair the mitochondria and actually make more mitochondria per cell. That's what makes an elite athlete elite, that they usually have more energy production potential in every muscle cell. And we only probably use, they say, right, whenever we recruit muscle, I think even like the best powerlifters, I think it's less than 50% of absolute muscle is recruited. So there's all other talk.
What does that mean, recruited? Built?
Like if you actually look at the neuro signals to activate muscle, we're only activating, even in like a heavy lift, I think it's between 40 and 60%.
Wow.
And so endurance athletes are usually only using 10 to 20% of their actual muscle fibers. And even a sprinter, I think, again, don't quote me on that. I know it's, so the whole other side of performance is neurocognitive, of training the nervous system to activate more muscle, more firing of muscle. And that's a whole different discussion that's both important. But I think mitochondria is what most people need to hear about now, because they could be doing it for a really affordable price, coming in, getting red light.
Yep, red light therapy. Yep.
Stressing the body. I think cold plunges and like deliberate changes of temperature, we think of it, the main thing, it's working out your blood vessels in a way that no other lymphatic anything is going to do. And there's a benefit to definitely dopamine. It seems to be when you basically your body, when you get into a cold plunge or a cryotherapy session, your body, there's a moment at which it thinks it's going to die.
Correct.
Right. And there's a moment that you want to quit. And when you get through that,
fight or flight,
there's this big just dump of parasympathetic nervous system, of dopamine and everything that is, I mean, I think
oxytocin,
was it 7 times more dopamine than a hit of cocaine from the right?
Insane.
If you do a cold plunge properly.
And it lasts for 4+ hours.
That's incredible. Yeah. So I think those are like really worth talking about. And then so someone that's already doing that, so like the ideal state, and I think as a student, I was more ideal. I had a bunch of students with me in DC. It was good to feel their enthusiasm and really want to know, like the idealistic state would be someone would already be doing that. They'd already be sleeping great. They'd be already doing everything they could. And then if they can't figure one out, or it's not 100% yet of where they could be, then they add in a peptide. Then they come, realistically, I want to work with anyone that's, especially if they're like, hey, look, I got 3 kids. I'm doing this. Now, I don't want to ever let them stay in that place of excuses of saying wherever you invest your time and effort and money, like that is ultimately your values. So I do think one thing I love to talk about with believers too, is that if we're called, if the greatest command that Jesus said was to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, all your might, that actually does require us to be optimal physically.
Okay,
that requires,
all right, go.
We can't be upset. I think we can make fitness and health an idol, and we can become orthorexic. That is certainly, I think I was there. I think I had an unhealthy obsession with winning triathlons and stuff. And I think I definitely work with athletes on that side, but that's not the general public. Most people are undervaluing health or trading long-term health for current, you could say satisfaction or goals, but I'm too busy. I don't have enough money. I don't have this, I have that. Yeah, you can stay there, or you can be asking God, like, God, what do you want me to do? And almost for sure, most people, there's at least one step they can take tomorrow. That could be, I was talking earlier,
to become their optimal version of themselves.
Yeah.
Health-wise.
Most people shower every day. You could take a cold shower. It's not going to have all the same benefits as 37 degrees cold plunge, almost dying, but you get that moment of, I can't breathe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You get that. And so, I mean, and it's not going to be as good as a full body cryo. It's not going to be as good as stacking cryo with red light and sauna. But, if people don't have the resources, and I think there's people like you and I, probably at most healthy churches, that really want to help people. I think Dr. Matt Huber is a great example. I think there's, Awaken has taken me to the next level of, there has been a little bit of a poverty mindset, I think, among a lot of my military, or they take some of the verses out of context, maybe what Paul says, leading a quiet and humble life. I think we are called, Proverbs 11 says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with the humble, there is wisdom. I see it's absolutely possible to stay humble and stay healthy in our own physical and spiritual journey, and encourage others, bring others with us. I think one way I've seen that, the culture of honor that Awaken really preaches, something I wasn't really a part of. It was kind of mainly we got to challenge people. Jesus challenged people, but Jesus loved people and he called people higher. And I've been blown away. My pastor, Mike Yeager, has just been such a God sent him, and a guy named Jared Van Tassel are 2 men that are discipling me right now. And these guys are men of God that, they usually 8 out of 10 things are positive, but they have enough authority in my life because I see them following Jesus. I see the way they lead their businesses, the way they love their wives, the way they love their kids, so that when they see something off in my life, they can correct me too, and do that out of love. But the culture of honor that they've created, they honor the things that God honors. And that's a tool, that's a skill. And that's what I hope to do with people's health. If I see, my goal isn't to make someone just faster, stronger to get through SEAL training or to get to SEAL Team 6 or to win the Olympics or whatever the case someone's coming to me for. That is nice. That hopefully that can be out of an abundance, out of an overflow of health and life and performance. But my hope is that, people are doing what God's calling them to do, that they're doing it to the fullest, that they can activate every aspect of their physical, mental, emotional health. And we've created that environment. People share stuff with me that they probably weren't expecting to when they walk in. And that being a steward of that, of being able to help them and point them back to Jesus. And that comes through health,
And think about the mission we're on here, bro. I got the wellness center. You've got your clinic. Talk about a great mission to just help people heal and help people realize that the body can heal itself.
Yeah.
That's
Amen.
the biggest thing.
Amen.
Is because we're all being programmed that you have to have a pill. That's the only way is pills. The body can act. But how do you trigger the natural healing properties of the human body? Nobody's out there talking about it because they'll quiet that. That's considered like conspiracy theories, right?
And then, I think the latest study, 98% of medications so far, I think it's shifting a little bit, are antagonists. They block something in the body. So someone might
98%.
I think of pharmaceuticals until the year 2010. I think there's probably, I don't know what the latest statistics is, but that's why peptides are so popular now, because pharmaceutical companies are trying to patent them, because most of them are agonists. They're supporting a pathway.
Yes.
They're helping the body produce more of something and multiplying. When we pray that God would multiply the effects of this peptide as they take it. And one thing I'll share, it's not that it's one or the other. However, and I never try to make it one or the other, conventional medicine or natural medicine or all this. I love that we have great diagnostic tools in conventional medicine and imaging and testing that we don't do, or specialists that zoom in on one little aspect of your health.
Right.
But zooming out is so important. And I will say, like, your doctor, if you've given them that authority in your life, in your health life, they do share their worldview. And I can say that because I do, and I don't even try to, I would say all the time. I do pray that God would allow me to speak into people's lives and help them. But no matter who you put in authority in your life, and it could be a well-intentioned, good doctor, if their worldview is not aligned with Jesus completely, they will share it. Like me and my wife, she had some health issues last year, and we went to the hospital, and I was just amazed because I was sitting on the other side of it. There's things that it was more of an acute situation. It wasn't where natural medicine comes in. I'm not a women's health expert. Bottom line is, like, we had a resident in there, newer doctor, first screening us, and the terms he was even using around fertility and women's health, like, were so contra, like, to what God's plan is, I would say, for life and fertility, and just dehumanizing the process of having a baby and all this stuff. And again, it wasn't his intention. He was trying to be nice. He's trying to take notes and pass it to his authority, to his higher ups. But doctors we do share our worldview, and that's a steward that I have to go to God every day, be in His Word, be as close to God. Help me see people the way you see them. Help me know even a small glimpse into who they are, so I can help them become. And God, help me know you more, so I can be more aligned with what your purpose is for them in their life. And so I say that because some people are like, well, I don't need that. I'm pretty healthy, whatever. It's like, we all need people speaking in our lives in every aspect if we're trying to optimize our life. And that's where, like we mentioned some of those guys earlier, like Wynn, Casey, like they're trying to optimize their health in their, in their 40s, 50s, wherever they are. Like they, and I'm really grateful to get to work with men like that see the value, and some are seeing it in their physical health, and that might be the way to optimize their spiritual health.
Right.
Some, it might be they want to optimize their spiritual health, and that leads them. And that's been more exciting because I've gotten more men like that, hey, I want to be the best husband, man of God that I can be, best father, best grandfather, depending on the season, right? Best friend, the best whatever. Then, hey, this is where your health comes into that. Sometimes it's harder to work backwards, but either way, it's like, I think Jesus, like with the rich young ruler, for example, that parable, Jesus put his finger on the one thing. He pointed the one thing that guy needed to sell everything to go follow Jesus. And that was hard for that guy. Others, it might be giving up something else. It might be giving up alcohol. It might be giving up
sugar,
staying up late to watch Netflix. And it might feel difficult and hard in the beginning, but it's going to be well worth it. It might be adding something that they don't like doing. So there's difference between the Bible talks more about self-control than discipline. They're both important.
Wow.
Self-control is not doing something, that you shouldn't. And self-discipline is doing something that you should do. And they're both very, very important. There is, I think, the thou shalt nots focus more on the control side, but self-control is a skill.
I like that.
It is something that we need to train, and I call it resilience. So resilience, I think my number one job physically is to help people have more physiologic resilience, where, if you got called to go on some crazy mission to save someone tonight, like you can stay up for 48 hours. Like you should be able to do that with our physical capabilities, get the job done, add stimulants, whatever we need to do. How quickly though can you finish that mission and return to optimal? And hopefully most of us aren't stretching our limits that much.
Yeah.
But let's just say you did. Let's say you had a big work thing or thing you're preaching, let's say on Sunday,
Yeah.
and you got to grind and you didn't plan ahead and you didn't take time. Well, you know what? It's okay to stretch, to do what God's calling us to do, but then come back. Jesus often retreated to the wilderness to recover, to pray, to be with God alone. So we don't know how often, but we know it was often. You know, I think we're called to do the same with our physical health so that we can be ready to be stretched. God, like whether it's the enemy, whether it's God, we will be called to higher. We will be stretched. The definition of health is being able to get cold and return, right? Actually, that's probably one of the best tests is how long does it take to warm up from cryo, from cold plunge? If you can't warm up quickly, like small guys like me, like we're not as physiologically resilient. Like I need to train that. That's a trainable thing we can do. And I can help people with that with peptides and other tools, become more physiologically. People think of mental resilience. That's super important. And that can be trained too. But I know we can help your physiological resilience. Where if you do, you have a few drinks, maybe you have too many. That's not ideal. But can you be stretched and have tools and things to come back to optimal? I'm always going to focus on optimal and aim, not never let people, we're not going to just be okay with you being stressed out, this and that, saying that you can't get good sleep. No, like we can see optimal. And if you know what, you're making decisions that aren't going to let you there or whatever circumstances are, then we still work with that. There's still ways to optimize within those confines and go beyond that.
Because to your point here, the impact that God designed you to make in this world, we're all given gifts, God-given gifts. We're made to cultivate them and optimize our gifts, right? Our calling, right?
Yeah.
You're not going to have as big of an impact if your health is failing.
Absolutely.
Right? How simple is that?
Yeah, I heard the quote the other day, and it's more of a secular quote. When you're healthy, you have 1,000 problems. When you're sick or when you're hurting, there's only one thing that matters. And that's
one problem.
Yep.
Let's repeat that. When you are healthy, you have 1,000 problems. When you are unhealthy or sick, whatever, same thing, you only have one problem.
Yeah.
Think about that, folks. Think about that, because when you're healthy, all the others, oh, my bills, the business, oh my God, relationship, oh my gosh. But does it all that? And listen, some of it matters, of course.
Yes.
However, what the reason it's putting in perspective is because the main priority in your life should be your health, because health is wealth. Health is all that matters. Even if you're, like, say you're striving to become a multimillionaire, billion, whatever, how good is that money if you're not even healthy and can't even enjoy it?
Amen. Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense.
Amen. And that's why what you do and what I do, most of what we do has side benefits, right? So like, even if red light only had mental benefits, let's just say, because people would try to disprove the science or whatever. It's like,
yeah, of course.
Even if it only made you 2% more focused during the day, that'd be worth it. But if it's also improving the elasticity of the cardiovascular system, if it's also improving mitochondrial health and density, if it's also improving eyesight long-term, like, Gary Brecka does a good job of breaking that down.
He's
a believer. And I love he's able to, as a PhD, not a doctor, he's able to look at the science and make pretty good claims, I think, around what it can do.
Right.
Not necessarily what it's done in patients. And then I try to apply that to my patients, him and Andrew Huberman, these great PhD researchers that are bringing this stuff to the masses now, which is great. And then we get to objectively test that, right? Like we could have someone do, real deal wellness before and after for 3 months. And I think we could see potentially some objective changes, and that would be a fun process. That would be N=1 science. I really like you versus you, right? Like the science is going to say this, but maybe your body will respond even better. Maybe I said a growth hormone peptide is going to raise it 50 points for someone, the IGF-1. Maybe yours it'll raise 70 and you'll feel even better. I never like to put limits on what's possible. We might do one small change that we'll see if that actually shifts it, and it unlocks everything. That's inertia, it's feed forward. So I always aim for things that have potential side benefits, not side effects. There could be a side effect or two, but I say side effects, not long-term issues like short-term feeling hot or something.
Yeah, right.
Okay. But for you, and it's the same thing. It's like my sheep know my voice. Like if we're on track, if we're on the right path towards what God's calling us to, there will be side benefits. Like even though, like I was with Pastor Mike Yeager, and like he was, really excited to have this Coronado service, like first weekly service we had, and he was praying. We were praying, and I just felt God say, like, seek first the kingdom. Like he's going to have, and he actually that week had a breakthrough in his business called Soul Strata. And I'm just blown away by what the stewardship of Mike Yeager. Like, I don't know if he's been on this podcast yet, but he is such a man of God, and he's representing Jesus in the business field with his family. And he's running Eastlake and Coronado right
Crazy.
now. And like God is just totally doing a work in Coronado. I know it's even Emerge, people didn't even know how much God's doing, but there's, maybe 20 committed families right now, and there's 100 people every week. And there is spiritual warfare, but it is the
Coronado location.
Coronado,
Yeah.
We're there every Sunday at 4 p.m. and wife's on the worship team. I'm on the production team. Never thought I'd be doing production.
And this is 4 p.m. every Sunday.
Every Sunday.
Where's it located?
It's at the Coronado Village Elementary School.
Okay.
And, church is not a place, it is. And we now have connect groups. Me and so the Trainors and the Duffys are leading a Friday night connect group as of this Friday, May 2nd, which is amazing. And because God, tables and altars, God's really put that in my heart that God got a hold of me. I shared that altar moment of me being in the wilderness or whatever, and on the way from Utah to Washington. But also, like, I've had encounters with God that those alone, though, like you said, I may not have been ready earlier. Those were impactful, but I mostly got transformed by a table, like having a conversation with a guy helping me learn to read the Bible for myself and grow with the Lord. So over the last 10 years, I've mostly valued tables, like discussions, discipleship, one-on-one. And then I started seeing that for my example, my wife got like transformed and saved and wrecked during a worship song. She was far from the Lord. She was in church praying for her mom who had COVID, and she got like changed, and she's never been the same.
Wow.
And that is true. And I met her, by the time I met her, she was reading the Bible. She was studying the word. Like, it can happen either way. Just because I started more like the knowledge, reading the Bible, and then God transformed my heart. Other people have an experience. And if we only have an experience and don't have discipleship and mentorship and tables to have these discussions, like, we don't know. So the ideal, like, that's really what I love about Awaken, is that most of our leaders are people that are in the business place, people I look up to. I love people that are also committed their whole lives to be vocational, in ministry. For this season of my life, I'm really grateful God's put me in a body of believers that is doing both. And they're saying, hey, this is where I'm going. Do you want to come follow me as I follow Christ?
Come on.
Like Pastor Mike laid it out, he said, 50 years from now, what is Coronado going to look like? Is it going to look the same? Is there still going to be the same level of oppression? Is there going to be, there's plenty of people with plenty of resources wealth-wise, but most of them can't sleep at night.
Wow.
They need real deal sleep. They need Trinity, but they need the Lord, number one.
Yes.
They need spiritual breakthrough, and we can hopefully facilitate that. And even if we can't, God can, and we're there every week to pray for it on Tuesday morning. We're praying, we're creating an altar every Sunday and Tuesday and other days, but we're also, it's our lives. Like you said, we need to leave the life transformed. The verse, and God gave this to me on this morning and driving over here, 1 John 3:18, and it's not just about quoting the Bible, but it says, little children, let us not love in word or in talk, but in action and in truth. And that's what we started the podcast with. That's what I'd love to kind of close it with, is that idea that let us love in action and in truth. That people are going to know that we love the Lord by the fruit in our lives and by the way that we love them.
Yep.
And that's what I care about my patients, but with my friends, with our church, like, love conquers all. Like, and people know, and love doesn't mean some ooey gooey thing. It's real life. It's, you reaching out to me to be able to share what I'm passionate about. Me sharing that with others. Hopefully there's love that exudes from this, and that's what can unlock and change lives.
Come on now. All right. So, man, I want to keep going, dude. We're already 2.5 hours in. We're 2.5 hours in.
Nice.
Watchers, listeners they know they're not healthy. They know they need, and I call that short-term pain, long-term pleasure. I preach that a lot. All the stuff that getting in a cold chamber, getting in a hot sauna, taking these peptides, doing injections, whatever. This is a little bit painful. Eating right, it's painful.
Yeah.
Short-term pain, long-term pleasure.
Wow. Yeah.
Short-term pleasure, eat whatever you want, drink alcohol, party, whatever. Long-term pain.
Yeah.
So these people that know that they're listening, they're like, God, I need to get a start. Where do they start and how? Like, what is the first thing they do? Reach out, get the consult, get a blood test, start there, because the blood don't lie.
Right. And there's other great clinics. I think like Catalyst
Wellness is my.
And I think there's so many, hurting, sick people that, like I said, we're hiring another doctor. We're going to do our best to keep up with the blessing that God's allowed us to be in. But with our clinic, it's called an optimization visit. Most people, that's where they start. If they're dealing with 5 or more chronic conditions. They have 20 different meds. You would have a more advanced like functional medicine consult that's closer to 300, but that's still well worth. It's usually 3 hours of our time, so it's well worth it to them. But either way, they can go to trinitynaturopathic.com. They can we'll put our clinic information, but we're right on Coronado, but we treat people all over the area. We do a lot of telemedicine for those who can't get it, can't get in local. And yeah, if it's not with us, I think either way, finding more ways to track your health, finding a local wellness place.
Yeah.
I think fitness trainers, coaches, athletic trainers, like there's so many people that can help you. But I do think having some support, if you have the resources, like do outsource some of your health.
Yeah.
Like even when I had all this research, all this podcasts I learned, once I was able to entrust that functional medicine doctor, Lisa Perry, to help me, that's when some health started growing. Once I was able to entrust some of my spiritual health to another mentor, like some of it, right? We still need to take ownership of our health, but having guides, I think that I'm shining a light on. So if I can be a guide for you, for someone else, like that's an honor. And, but if it's not me, I'd love to help others. There's a instituteforfunctionalmedicine.org. There's some other great providers. Again, I think the unique part is finding, especially someone that's like our clinic, the first thing that happens in the morning, it gets prayed over. That's the first thing on the checklist for whoever shows up first. Second thing in, there's worship on. We're declaring healing in that place. So I hope that everyone gets to experience that along with the physical breakthrough. So yeah.
I love it. Okay, so this would be a good ending note, but I can't end it because there's a parent listening that needs to hear this, and I want you to talk because I meant to ask you this the whole time and I forgot. ADHD or like the doctors are going there right away with kids, putting them on meds. The amount of kids that I'm hearing that are on medication, that are immediately being prescribed just to get them on meds. Can you touch on this for 5 minutes?
I can, yeah. I think I know I can't really imagine. I'm sure if I was 20 years later in the world, I would have been on ADHD meds. As like I said, the only boy in my family, probably messing things up, whatever. Thankfully, we had a yard I could run around. Like, thank God. I can't imagine if I didn't. I don't treat most kids. I think 12 and up is kind of where I've drawn the line. Our new doctor, Dr. Autumn, does treat kids. She has her second child on the way herself, her and her husband, Josh. We definitely do consults for kids. I do think that guys like men like Dr. Matt, I think they're doing a great job. I do think physically there's definitely structural. So we didn't really hit on structural and function. I do think adjustments, chiropractic, body work can really change the nervous system flow, the physiology for kids. A lot of times they're fidgeting because they do have physical restrictions. There's osteopathic medicine. There's a lady, Dr. Marianne. Really, I think there's a clinic called Nourish locally that my friend Dr. Jordy Smith.
The meds that they're prescribing, aren't they kind of counterproductive?
I think
Can you touch on that?
I think that it's hard to weigh out the benefits and risks, and it's kind of like death by a million cuts. There's nutrient. Magnesium is actually a key nutrient that gets depleted from Adderall, for example, from Ritalin. And so methylphenidate Ritalin is definitely not safe alone, right? It has side effects. They often show up years and years later. Can something like Adderall be used as a tool to sit down and grind for 40 hours of work? Maybe. I don't know. But I don't think it's a daily thing. I treat a lot of adults that have been on them since being kids, so that's what I can speak to. And it definitely seems to change. Anything that we do that changes God's design, I think should be taken really, really seriously. And if something that changes, like birth control, like hormones at a young age, like anabolics, like it can change the way we make decisions from an underlying unconscious perspective. And I think Adderall could be in a similar field where it might not be shifting hormones, but it may be changing neurotransmitters enough that no one's ever too far gone. I love hyperbaric oxygen for children. I love homeopathy. There's things like children, you can see a small shift very quickly. So well before I'd consider Adderall, let's say for a child, for mine, or some sort of stimulant for focus, I would be looking at holistic healing. I think there is ways to go about it. I think, like I said, some sort of manual therapy often does amazing for kids. Treating the gut oftentimes, the gut's the second brain. We get the neurotransmitters. We say we make over 90% of serotonin in the gut. So we gotta at least consider those. Whether those are the answer, there might be a small set of population that still may benefit from stimulants and Adderall and different things, but I don't think it's the rate at which, right?
Dad came in with this softball teenage girl, right? He said the softball organization that they're a part of and all her friends at school, all of them are on Adderall.
Wow. This is something I'm not as aware of, but this needs to be.
And he said she's getting so much pressure to do it. She wants to do it because all her friends are doing better in school.
Yeah. short-term gain we don't know.
Bro,
right?
how bad is this? I'm concerned. Like this is, it's a thing.
Yeah, this hasn't been a top thing, but for me, I haven't seen it, but this is, like you're saying, like
I was horrified. I had no idea.
Could we see a similar change in effect by cold shower in the morning for that same kid, right? Possibly. Could it be by small amount of physical activity, a 10-minute HIIT workout right before class? Probably going to increase blood flow and increase neurocognition better than anything else. But yeah, I'd love to have that deeper conversation.
Yeah.
At some point.
All right.
I had to, it's funny when
I had to bring that up.
Your heart of like, when someone comes with it, it's like, it's heavy. That's heavy to know that there's a systemic level that is now impacting the person in front of you. Because right, if something's impacting, I read about it, it's like, okay. But then when I sit down with someone and I see that same thing out there is now impacting them.
Yeah.
And it's hurting them and someone right in front of me that's in my life, that's when it becomes real. And usually, like, we actually are now kind of known as a preconception fertility clinic. I had no plan on that, but we've seen enough of a need that there's not so many miscarriages. That is one factor of it, but there's so much else we can do to optimize health right before.
Yeah.
And that's become, so it hasn't gotten there yet with like teenagers and Adderall for me, but similar with fertility, it's like, that is something that me and my wife, we're trying to start a family now. And it's not just a selfish ambition, but it's been around us. We've been seeing not just trouble, but like suboptimal, right? There's families that have been trying, they don't know, they've never had their hormones tested. They've never had the basics. So same with Adderall, like we could actually look at, there's things I know we could look at first, or stones we could turn over first, well before considering that. But peer pressure, a lot of that's tough. So
it's nuts, dude.
We'll be praying for that for sure.
All right. So go back to when you're talking about we're here to love.
Yeah.
I want you to finish with that note. Just hit that one more note. I want to finish with that one. Because I got back off on stuff and I had to.
Of course, right? So someone could, well, he's a naturopathic doctor, he's a hippie doctor, this and that. It's like, look, I don't really care. I get to help people every day. I love working with medical doctors, nurse practitioners. Like, do whatever you want. But I know that part of the calling is that I'm called to, like 1 John 3:18 says, love not in word and talk only, which is what we got to do today, but also in action and in truth. So, anyone that does come to me through this podcast or through our connection, like, they will experience the love at our clinic. I know that's true. I know that they will see a breakthrough in their life. And it's not from the words we'll talk about. We'll actually see there's actionable changes. Anyone that walks into our church is going to experience the same thing.
Yeah.
And there could be some hard things, right? It could be hard in the beginning. They might have to let go of certain things. They might have to change some stuff, but it's going to not only be worth it, but there should be not just new life. There shouldn't be just preventative changes so that we can exist longer. It's going to be life and life abundant. People are going to see changes in their workplace. There might be financial miracles along the way. Like, people will experience breakthrough if they're doing what God's calling them to do. And if they're tuning in, if they don't know what that is, then find a mentor, find someone to start that they want. Look at someone's life and see what they have and their action, how they're interacting with the world, what they're bringing, and start learning from them. Like all of us, we definitely help people as a profession, you and I, but we also do that with our whole lives. My whole life that's what it's devoted to. As we're setting up church from noon to 4 on Sundays, like, yes, that's to put together an altar for people to have an encounter with God, but it's also, there's discipleship happening. There's real life happening. There's, someone telling me about their marriage, or we're talking about their kids and helping them physically oftentimes. And Jesus, that's the one thing. No one that came to Jesus, even those that came out of the crowd and reached, no one that came to Jesus did not get healed. Everyone that comes in will experience breakthrough. So that's my encouragement, that if we're loving each other, if we're called to that, we're going to point people towards Jesus, but Jesus will absolutely heal them and love them. And it's going to be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually.
Let's go, man. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Brian Trainor, it's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. I could literally go all day. I have like a million questions in my brain that I still want to ask you, but
Part 2. Let's go.
But we'll do a 2.0.
Yeah.
And this time I'll have just the list.
Yeah, let's do it.
And we'll fire away on all. But we hit the good ones. We hit the Methylene Blue, the NAD. These are hot topics right now. So, bro, I appreciate your time. Appreciate your mission, man. Appreciate your heart.
Thank you.
It's just admirable. I'm so glad that we got to actually meet today, folks. This is the first time we've actually met in person. But it's been an honor, man. And that's man, I want to go all day, but that's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. Real Deal Talk. Oh, and it's Trinity Naturopathic.
Yeah, we can put a link in.
Yep, in Coronado.
Coronado.
So if you have any questions, hit them up. As you can obviously see and hear. He is here to help and here to guide you, and obviously he promoted other clinics as well. So he's not all about just me. He's like, he just wants everybody to become as healthy as possible, the most healthiest version of themselves. And that was very clear and very apparent today. So we appreciate you, brother. That's it. Real Deal Talk. That's a wrap. Have a nice day. There it is.